поводу Маруся, раз, два, три, калина чорнявая дівчина, саду ягоди рвала. Маруся, раз, два, три, калина чорнявая дівчина, саду ягоди рвала. Вийшла дівчинонька, рано вранці воду брать, а за нею козаченько веде коня напувать. Маруся, раз, два, три, калина чорнявая дівчина, саду ягоди рвала. Маруся, раз, два, три, калина чорнявая дівчина, саду ягоди рвала.
Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страны.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Future
guys?
The lead Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1063 of the War News stream. And today we have very big news of Ukrainian attacks on crucial Russian aviation plants. Also, Israel's going to be sending weapons to Ukraine very shortly, and Ukraine's announced a successful Crimea blockade as we speak. And it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 48 hours of news from around the world, as we've been able to get significant news today that the armed forces of Ukraine have been able to conduct successful actions on multiple fronts, once again causing significant damage to the Russian Federation's war effort and their warfighting abilities. As today in the city of Smolensk, a major drone attack has hit the Smolensk Aviation Factory, a significant factory for the production of KH-55, KH-59, and Su-25 aircraft in the war. We have also been able to hear in other areas that significant strikes in the Voronezh Oblast and also in Bryansk have also leveraged significant damage as well. This came on the very day that the United States of America saw the official change in leadership from one presidency to the next. And with the incoming presidency, we have been able to hear some interesting things that have caused some confusion in the public sphere, but sifting through it all as we were doing yesterday, we were able to find that there was some very good news. Of course, a silver lining to every cloud that can be seen, as there was a United States executive order issued yesterday that suspended all foreign funding, with the major caveat that the U.S. Secretary of State could request an exemption for a specific funding of a foreign funding policy that could be granted. And we were able to hear that the Secretary of State immediately requested for Ukraine to be given exemption, and the exemption was granted, meaning that the state of Ukraine will be able to receive foreign support even during the 90-day window that has begun on the foreign funding freeze. We have also been able to hear at the exact same time that the United States of America is already directly threatening, through the office of the president, further and more serious sanctions against the Russian Federation if they do not take peace negotiations seriously. And according to prior statements heard last week from the Russian Federation, we are assuming that these severe sanctions will most likely be implemented incredibly soon. An extension of the United States of America's never-ending devotion through all presidencies to support the United States and its interests around the globe against our adversaries. Meanwhile, in the area of the Middle East, we have been able to hear that the Syrian interim government has made their final bravura today against the Russian Federation, as they have permanently revoked all Russian port and dockage rights throughout the area of the Syrian coastline, and are now allowing the Russians a small window of time to bring in all of their support vessels and evacuate the remainder of the Russian army that is inside of Syria. As the last Russian soldier and last Russian vehicle rolls on to one of these ships that the Russians have brought into the port of Tartus, we will be seeing the final footsteps of Russian Federation armed forces inside of the nation of Syria for the foreseeable future. Meanwhile, within southern Lebanon, we have been able to hear that the Israelis are already beginning to mention the provision of Russian captured weapons from Hezbollah forces to Ukraine in their support of the war effort. We have also been able to hear in the area of East Asia that the Chinese Communist Party has directly begun to open quite strongly about even further economic ties with the Russian Federation, once again bringing the Russian Federation even deeper into the People's Republic of China's ilk. Meanwhile, we've been able to see on the front lines of Ukraine itself that significant fighting has occurred in between Russian Federation and armed forces of Ukraine forces, with it appearing that the Russian Federation is still taking incredibly high casualties and not making any frontline ground whatsoever. We were also able to hear the Ukrainian air defense shot down a wide array of drones last night, ranging in the dozens, and we were also able to hear of additional dozens being taken down through electronic warfare means. We have also been able to see a large amount of news happening around the area of Rostov-on-Don, as just a few hours before the stream went live, the sound of Ukrainian lawnmowers, or as we call them, the lawnmowers of death, began to whir over the city of Rostov, and it appeared that doom was near for Russian war industry within the city. We have a massive amount of news.
Sounds like we got a laundry list of news going on here. That was a long, intro segment, honestly. That's a ton of news.
That is an insanely high amount of news. I think Matthew sounds shocked about that because before the news, we were like, well, there's some big things, but not really a lot. But we actually do have a massive amount of news to cover tonight. And moving directly into our first major news bulletins of the day, we were able to hear of the major and significant attacks that occurred in the city of Smolensk against the Smolensk Aviation Factory. Really quickly, just to make sure that we know exactly where the Smolensk Aviation Factory is, and y'all don't see me trying to wander around the city. And let's see, Aviation Factory, and we want to type that in right there, and here we are. Well, actually, I believe that the Smolensk Aviation Factory is somewhere a little bit further down here, but nevertheless, it is within this industrial area of the city of Smolensk. Nevertheless, we were able to hear the Ukrainian drones were able to deal a significant blow to the Russian Federation and their aviation abilities with a strike that occurred on the Smolensk Aviation Plant today, as we were able to see fire coming off the direct side of the Smolensk Aviation Plant, seen right here. We can also see that a proper geolocation was made by Rocket Man on Twitter, and we were able to geolocate it to this exact spot near to the main manufacturing hall right here. This hit is a very significant one, as a direct hit to this aviation plant, oddly enough, actually has a lot to do with the war in Ukraine. This specific plant produced Su-25s, Kh-55s, and Kh-59s for the war effort. And to quickly go over each one of the items that they manufactured, let me make sure to go pull them up on the second screen really quickly, and then show y'all each weapon in sequence that this factory was responsible for manufacturing at different times. This is the Su-25, the Russian version of the A-10 Warthog. It is unequivocally worse than the A-10 Warthog, I would actually argue, but nevertheless, beyond that, the Su-25 is the Russian close air support aircraft of the Russian armed forces, and while sanctions have made sure that Russian aviation output is not as high as it was in the pre-war figures, the Russian Federation has still been able to eke out a small number of Su-25s throughout the war, once again lessening the amount of attrition that the Russian close air support aviation wings has suffered throughout the course of the war, as with every 2 Su-25 shot down, one of those is generally replaced with production abilities that are still ongoing behind the lines. Su-25s have also been the most numerously used aircraft in the entirety of the war outside of the Su-35 class, which is a Sukhoi modified Su-27 that has been modified into a fighter bomber. The Su-25 is about as used at this point as the Su-34. Both of them have made a wide arrayment of appearances throughout the war. Nevertheless, with the hit of this factory, which was one of the larger producers of Su-25s and Su-25 parts, we are assuming that the Russian Federation will not have as easy a time being able to once again reduce the attrition rate that they are suffering. While generally losing aircraft over the course of the war, even with current production abilities, with their production abilities even more greatly impacted, we'll probably see that only a half of an Su-25 replaces the 2 losses that they take about every single month. And this does mean that in the end, the Russian Federation will be seeing that there is a heavy decrease in close air support aviation wings made out of Su-25s that will be available in the theater of the Ukraine war. Meanwhile, outside the Su-25, there are a couple of more interesting weapons that this factory does produce, ones that actually are a little bit more important than the Su-25 in the bigger picture. This is the Kh-55, also called the Kent here in the West. I don't know why we call it that, but beyond that, This little missile right here is one that has been wildly seen throughout the course of the war, with hundreds of them, probably even more than that, probably over 1,000 of these missiles being fired into the airspace of Ukraine by Russian aviation and ground forces. The Kh-55 is an air-launched cruise missile, generally launched from the bomb bays of Tu-95s and Tu-22M strategic bombers that have been in operation for quite some time, and these can also be launched from the Tu-160 as well. All of these aircraft usually are launched, just to remind everyone, out of the airbase at Ingalls, which many of y'all will remember, the fuel storage tanks that house most of the aviation-grade jet fuel that most Russian strategic bombers use took a very significant hit, and a large percentage of that fuel was lost in the fire that lasted nearly 10 days. This means that the Russian bomber fleet is not going to be able to fly the large amount of missions that they have in the past, as the available fuel reserves are no longer there, and they're having to deal directly with the production being made on the oil refinery grid, which is far decreased due to the Ukrainian attacks knocking out around 20% to 15% of all Russian oil refineries. At the same time, now one of the major factories that has produced Kh-55 missiles, such as this one that's actually at a Ukrainian Air Force museum, are now going to be greatly limited as well, meaning that now the Russian Federation cannot even work off of their direct supply of missiles because it's quite considerably reduced, meaning that in general, the Russian missile attacks into Ukrainian skies will be significantly reduced due to the amount of available bombers, due to the limits on their fuel consumption, and also the limit on the available amount of missiles, as we do believe that the Russian stockpiles of these Kh-55 missiles has been reduced so significantly for about the past year. They've been working directly off of the missile production that has been made through Russian war factories like the Smolensk Aviation Plant. And finally, last but not least, a very interesting weapon is the Kh-59, called the Ovod. This is a very interesting kind of a missile. This is actually a Russian cruise missile with a two-stage solid fuel propulsion system and a 200-kilometer with a additional 200-kilometer range with a turbojet engine, which you can see this one actually has the turbojet engine mounted below. This missile has not been used a large deal throughout the war. It's something that you just don't really see much of, but we have seen them in use in limited numbers. These are a little bit more difficult for the Russian Federation to produce and also be able to field. So for this reason, we don't really see these as much as the Kh-55. However, this factory was one of the primary producers of the Kh-59 Ovod missile, as we call it, the Kazoo, which I think is a very adept name for NATO to call this thing the Kazoo. But beyond that, it is still nice to hear that this factory has been hit. It will be dealing a significant blow to Russian military abilities, especially aviation abilities, which have become so crucial to Russia attempting to bring Ukrainian economic and military abilities to their knees to see that Ukraine is put into a worse position in the negotiating table. Meanwhile, in Bryansk, we've also been able to see that severe damage has been inflicted on the chemical plant that was stricken here around 3 days ago on Sunday, which we reported then. And we were able to see that there was damage to multiple buildings throughout the chemical plant, and this will most likely cause some significant issues for the Russian Federation moving forward. And meanwhile, in the area of Lysky within the Voronezh Oblast, we were able to see that a major fuel depot within this area was on fire, and Russian fire brigades were attempting to put it out. Big shout out, by the way, to the Russian fire brigade, which is just spraying down these guys in sub-zero temperatures with a fire hose. I haven't seen anything like this before, but they really had their priorities straight.
The Russians struggle to put out a fire when it's literally, what is that, foam or is it snowing?
It's snow and foam. It's kind of a mixture of the two.
Yeah, those firefighters up front, they're getting basically waterboarded at this point.
Man, they're sitting there, and the guy behind the fire hose, he's like, tell me, where are the NATO saboteurs, please? And meanwhile, the firefighters up there are like, you know, like drowning in the foam. But moving on from that and into our next clip in the area, we were able to see the damage to Lysky from this satellite picture, showing that the large oil silos have been heavily damaged. Let me take you all to this little town in the Voronezh Oblast, Lysky, here really quickly. And let me make sure to find the specific oil facility so that way we can show y'all. It's actually, here we go. Here it is. This is a significant facility. I want to remind y'all of the size of this thing, the sheer size of it. This is a normal-sized car. These are the tanks at this facility. These are actually some of the largest tanks that we've ever seen at a Russian oil storage facility, and we actually do not know the specific grade of fuel that is stored inside of this facility, but we can see that there is a large railroad onloading and offloading platform further down to the southeastern side of the compound, which is showing us that there is a pretty decent amount of, well, actually, just based off of the condition of these tracks, which appear to be relatively clean and devoid of any kind of debris or overgrowth, this is a heavily used rail corridor in this area, or spur line, that allows for the Russian Federation to be able to use this fuel silo to a heavy degree, showing that it isn't heavily removed from the direct supply line. It appears that this oil silo is directly connected to the main supply line for Russian oil and fuel products around the area. And also, there's some sort of a larger facility up here. I do not know what this is. This almost looks like a gulag, but let's see if we can get a street view and see what that is. Okay, that just looks like a gulag.
Like a chicken farm or something? It looks like maybe some type of like poultry farm or something.
There's some sort of a weigh scale building in front of the place too, and there's like an advertisement on the side. But I'll tell you, man, based on the location of this thing, looks like a gulag. But it could be a chicken farm. It's most likely a chicken farm, if anything. And of course, the Russians technically don't have gulags. They call them prisons now. But still, I think it most likely is a chicken farm. That's what I would assume. So I think you're right on that. A little bit. Wait, hang on. They have more of them. So let's see.
It's a poultry farm. I was right, man. What do you know?
Yeah,
that proves we grew up in the backwoods of Alabama. I know what a poultry farm looks like, so that proves it.
Man, hell, we know what a poultry farm looks like, but this really is a gulag. But beyond that, it is nice to see that the chickens will be kept warm. But there's, oddly enough, a large amount of these poultry farms around this area. You don't really see that many of them. Well, hang on. Well, there's more of them, actually. It looks like the town of Zelenskyy may have a major industry involving poultry in the Russian Federation, because we don't really see a lot of these poultry farms existing throughout other regions that we've checked on in the Russian Federation. But beyond that, this fuel silo that did get hit was right next to them, and you can see the damage that was caused, as it appears that half of the facility burned to the ground from the fire. It appears that the fire has already burned out for the large part as well, and that is, of course, great news, letting us know that the damage happened quickly and the Russian Federation was completely unable to control the fire. But moving on from that and all of the major strikes that we've been able to see in Ukraine today, it is time for us to move on over to something that was major that happened inside of the United States of America. Of course, I want to make sure and make it clear to everyone that we are not going to be talking about the domestic political situation inside the United States. The Enforcer channel is adamant on remaining in a non-political position in our news reporting, and of course, Matthew and me do have our personal political opinions, but this is a news channel first and foremost, and the news does not care about political affiliations or political opinions. We are simply here to report the news. And I want to make sure to remind you all of that before we move on into the United States, because while we do not talk about politics, we would be completely amiss to not talk about recent developments because of the political situation inside the United States of America. Nevertheless, these are great to hear. I want to make that very clear, as it does show a very positive outlook for the future, at least in terms of foreign policy when pertaining to Ukraine. And that moves us on into something that would initially sound bad, and I want to remind you all again, there will be good news to come out of it here in a second. But moving on into the United States of America, many of y'all will know that the administration of the office of the president has recently changed hands on January 20th. And we were able to see that the former president of the United States, now outgoing, well, former president of the United States, and we were able to see that the president-elect has now assumed the position of president of the United States after being inaugurated yesterday within the rotunda of the United States Capitol building. Immediately, interestingly enough, largely out of precedent, around 200 or so executive orders were issued. Some of them are so numerous in number, it's really hard to be able to ascertain exactly what some of these executive orders were about. But there is a very important one that came forward onto the table of the office of the president yesterday that was approved. And we were able to hear that U.S. foreign support has been suspended for 90 days. And there is a major caveat to this, so just hang tight. Don't think this is the end of the world. It's not the end of the world. The U.S. funding to Israel, Ukraine, Taiwan, and a large myriad of nations that do get U.S. foreign support had been suspended for a period of 90 days. According to the explanation that was given, this is being done so that way they could see if any any of these foreign funding objectives were within U.S. interests or not. However, there was a very interesting stipulation that the executive order allows for exceptions based on the recommendation of the Secretary of State. So there is a loophole to this. While it says across the board that all foreign funding is suspended for 90 days, the Secretary of State simply has to request that there is an exception made in particular categories of foreign support, and the President can then authorize an exception. This is a very interesting and important thing to talk about in the future, but we were able to see the specific pause that was made inside of this executive order, and it is a very interesting kind of a thing, but I want to make sure that we can find y'all the stipulation for the Secretary of State. And let me see here. I believe that it is somewhere around here. Let me see. Hang on.
I believe it was a backup page or
yeah,
maybe on a different
I think
page.
it was. Let's see. I think it was somewhere around here.
Yeah, it's Section E, waiver.
Yeah, Section E. Here we go. Waiver. The Secretary of State may waive the pause in Section 3A for specific programs. This is a very interesting caveat. Many people said, and also, really quickly, do have to say, no politics, folks. Just looked over in the chat, seeing a couple of people saying political things. We're not here to talk about the domestic political situation. If you have a problem with it, go vote again in 4 years. We're dealing with what we have now, and we're playing the cards we're dealt. But beyond that, this is the waiver that we are seeing right here, is that the Secretary of State may waive the pause to the foreign funding seen in Section 3A for specific programs. And this is the specific pause that was made. So I want to make sure to read y'all the specific statement made within the executive order. That's really the most important part. 90-day pause in United States foreign development assistance for assessment of programmatic efficiencies and consistency with the United States foreign policy. All department and agency heads with responsibility for United States foreign development assistance programs shall immediately pause new obligations and disbursements of development assistance funds to foreign countries and implementing non-governmental organizations, international organizations, and contractors pending reviews of such programs for programmatic efficiency and consistency with the United States foreign policy, to be conducted within 90 days of this order. The Office of Management and Budget shall enforce this pause through its appropriate authority. Now, well, through its apportionment authority. Sorry, a really quick description there, but nevertheless, I want to make sure to put this out there because this was probably the most interesting thing that was heard immediately. We did not hear this through the U.S. government. We actually heard this through the Ukrainian government. A exemption was immediately given for Ukraine. So we are understanding at this point, and we want to make sure that this is very clear to everyone. According to Ukrainian sources, the executive order does not apply to Ukrainian aid, and the United States will continue to supporting their war effort against the Russian Federation. So to make this very clear, from what we are understanding right now in the political realm at this moment, is that the executive order was issued yesterday. The Secretary of State immediately requested that there be an exemption for Ukraine support, and the President of the United States immediately granted an exemption for Ukraine military and financial support. So it does appear that at least at the moment, there has already been an exemption made in the case of Ukraine foreign funding by the United States administration for Ukrainian funding to be able to continue. We've also been able to hear...
Also, by the way, for the people asking about Israel and also Taiwan, we have not heard from those governments because we have to hear from them directly as to whether or not the aid got cut off or not, because apparently the U.S. government is not telling the public whether or not it's been given an exemption or not. So right now we don't know if Israel's been given an exemption, and we don't know if Taiwan's been given one either. So that's currently up in the air at the moment. But one thing we have gotten confirmation on, like the enforcer said, was Ukrainian officials have confirmed that they've been in contact with the U.S. and they've been granted that exemption as of, I think it was yesterday or the day before, so they're good to go.
Yeah, they were granted it yesterday right after the executive order was signed. So it appears that the executive order was signed technically for about, I think it was about an hour and a half or 2 hours. Foreign support had completely ceased from the United States to Ukraine, and then the Secretary of State requested an exemption for Ukraine. The President authorized it, so we're already hearing that there is no pause to Ukraine aid from the United States, and all aid prerogatives of national importance can continue in support of the state of Ukraine. So I want to make sure to iron that home, because I've already seen a lot of people taking this because they don't know how to read, and they also didn't listen to the Ukrainian government. And a lot of people are saying that chat, we're cooked and it's over and Ukraine's done for. Foreign aid is not stopping from the United States to the state of Ukraine. That has already been made very clear. They've already been provided an exemption to the 90-day pause on foreign aid. They have also been given a direct statement from the state of Ukraine to the general world that the aid has not stopped either, and that they have been provided this exemption. And so in total, Ukraine support will continue. And there's been a lot of other things that are already showing us that the current president of the United States, we also want to make this very clear that while we do not talk about politics, there has been a change in leadership, and with this change in leadership, there's going to be slightly different approaches to how things have been done in the past. But we've already been able to hear that the current president of the United States is beginning to apparently stoke the flames, as the president of the United States has said it's highly likely he will place additional sanctions on Russia if Putin does not stop the war in Ukraine. And the president is open to meeting with Putin to deliver peace in Ukraine, but we already know that it will not be happening, not because of a lack of American effort, but because of a lack of Russian effort. It has already been made clear by Russian pundits, such as their Secretary of Foreign Affairs, that they will not be considering any peace negotiations by the United States, and they are adamant that the war must continue. We also understand, according to the now Secretary of the Treasury, which I believe has been approved by the Senate yesterday, that he is already preparing and cooking up a sanctions program that, by his words, will bring the Russian Federation's economy to its knees, largely targeting the Russian oil companies and practically stopping them from selling oil abroad under any circumstances, or natural gas for that matter. Meaning,
and also, truthfully, Enforcer, the sanctions are really already in place. They were just issued, I think, right before the last president left office a couple of days back. The sanctions are already preventing, for example, India and China from accepting more Russian natural gas. That's happening right now. That's why Russian ships are stuck off the coast of China. And also, India said, you're not going to dock here. You're not selling it. You're going to have to go away. So it's already hitting them, and they're even talking about putting even worse sanctions on them. So we're talking about like regime-ending type sanctions coming up in the future.
So basically, what we're hearing right now is that the first presidency that has dealt with this war walked, so that way the second one can potentially run with it. Either way, both of them have contributed heavily and are going to be contributing heavily to seeing that American and Western interests are supported and upheld in the Ukraine conflict. And in the end, we will find some way to largely achieve and ascertain most of our objectives, if not all of the objectives that we are wanting to see inside of Ukraine, as well as the Ukrainians. So it largely does seem as though this is going to be a win-win for U.S. foreign policy through both presidencies, which I do have to say, of course, we still have a long ways to go. It's only day one of the second presidency that's dealt with the Ukraine war, but it does sound that things are going incredibly well under both of them so far in what is going to be happening for Ukraine. Hopefully, we will be able to see that through some means in the future, there will be a way that both presidencies will have worked to see the end of the Russian Federation's war in Ukraine and a success for American and Western objectives within the area. However, a lot of people are talking about the United States' plans to announce crippling sanctions. And we want to make it very clear, the previous sanctions were crippling in their own right. These sanctions are crippling relative to the already crippling sanctions that are in place. And it does appear that Russia is not really wanting to end the war at this point, but it doesn't really look like they may have a choice, at least on the economic aspect. And a lot of people are wondering, will this stop the war, or will this stop Putin from continuing the war, because the Russian economy truly will be brought to its breaking limit? And it seems as though a lot of people are saying that no, Putin will simply go berserk if the Russian economy is quite truly destroyed under his very feet. Others are saying that it really will force Putin to stop. Some others are saying that Russia can probably survive it somehow, and others are saying that they're a little unsure and undecided at this point about what direction this is going to be going in. And of course, we do have to remind everyone the future is always uncertain. Nobody ever really knows what's going to be going on, and I do have to say that right now it does sound like the current president is moving forward on the combination plan that Matthew and me put forward on this channel about a few days ago about crippling the Russian economy in one form or another and forcing them to the negotiating table on our terms. It does look largely like that's being followed through on, but what are people thinking Putin's response to that will be? And it seems as though a lot of people are believing that Putin will go berserk. But Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so it looks like about 45% of the audience said Putin is going to go berserk over it and it's not going to stop him, while 22% said yes, it will force Putin to stop the war, and 21% said Russia can probably survive it without the U.S. sanctions, of course, being put on them. So I would have to say on this one that I think the sanction idea is probably the best way forward to bring Russia to its knees, and there actually will be a pretty big video being released here on the Enforcer channel in a few days explaining how that's actually going to work in really great
It's
detail. So that's
baller.
coming out soon. It's in the works. It's about 75% finished. It's going to be explaining the entire NATO plan to destroy the Russian economy. And that plan is in motion right now. And it sounds like it's about to get worse really quickly. So Putin is about to be having a reckoning. And the question is Putin going to have a reckoning in a good way or a bad way? And I think the current situation is a lot of people don't understand how Putin's mindset really is right now. Putin has found himself in a corner. He's in a hole. And I don't think he's willing to simply stop the war and walk away from it, even right now at this point. I know he said that he's open to talks, but basically that means he's open to having his way or no way. So that means negotiations are probably going nowhere. I would generally say that Putin's going to go berserk over this. So if the Russian economy collapses, that will mean basically the end of his regime, and that'll be, of course, an existential crisis for him, and he'll have to figure out whether or not he's going to take everybody down with him, or he's simply going to let his regime fall, and that'll be the end of it. So generally speaking, I'm with the 45%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I do believe I would have to agree with the 45% as well. I believe that Russia will be going berserk over this, and Putin will be really pushing that charge to make sure that the Russians are going ballistic. I don't think that the Russians will bend to this initially. They made it very clear through their foreign minister Peskov that there will be really no attempt at an actual peace negotiation, and they are going to be looking at the exactment of unconditional exceptions of terms by Ukraine and the West for Russian efforts inside of Ukraine, which will be entirely unacceptable because that will be viewed as a defeat by Ukraine and the Western world. So for this reason, the war will go on. These sanctions will remain in place for quite some time, causing significant damage to the Russian economy. But that also will most likely ramp up the pressure on the Russians to start acting even more belligerent and more hostile in different ways to be able to see that the West flinches in some form and that they're actually able to bring them to the negotiating table on at least somewhat decent terms towards the Russians. But I do not think that that'll be achievable for the Russians, and they'll eventually have to relent and largely adhere to seeing that Ukraine and the United States get most of their objectives achieved in Ukraine while Russia only gets a few. That's what I'm largely thinking at this point. But nevertheless, I do have to say that what we are seeing so far is good news. Like, it's shockingly enough, it actually is pretty decent. Of course, many of us, including Matthew and me, were hearing about the news yesterday that foreign funding had been suspended entirely for 90 days. And that actually led us to have a decent amount of questions until about 3 hours later when we heard the Ukrainian government state that they had already been given the exemption. So things are looking on the up and up. Things are looking incredibly good, at least for now, and it also seems that in other areas of the world, at least at the moment, and of course we're not speaking on the domestic issue, that's a political topic we can't cover, but on the foreign policy issue, things are looking pretty good. Israel has been given the authority to conduct whatever offensive and defensive actions that they deem necessary by the United States, which previously they had not been given authorization for. We have also not really heard a lot about Chinese containment policies right now and how that pertains to Taiwan. We haven't really heard a lot about that at the moment. So we do not really know what direction that's heading in, so that's a bit of a gray area. But so far in the Middle East and in Ukraine, things sound like they're actually moving in a pretty decent direction. And once again, I do want to remind everyone that as far as we are seeing and understanding, the Secretary of State so far apparently requested that Ukraine gets an exemption, showing that the Secretary of State is on board for Ukraine's support. We have also seen that the Secretary of the Treasury has apparently already started to cook up plans for these condemning sanctions that we will impose on the Russian Federation soon, and we're already starting to hear statements directly from the office of the president so far that there will be a massive push to see that American and Western interests are achieved in Ukraine. And while the war will end, we will still see that Ukraine and the United States, along with the entirety of the Western world, is able to claim victory in the conflict. So for the large part...
Honestly, Honestly, Enforcer, I would think, based on what we're hearing right now, I think the sanctions plan was cooked up probably in tandem with the last administration and the current one, because there's no way this plan just suddenly went into motion, because of course it was the last administration that actually put the sanctions that we're currently dealing with, causing China and India to cut off the natural gas imports from Russia. So I think there was a combined effort here. And once again, we have seen Ukraine ramping up their attacks on oil and gas facilities inside of Russia, and that started actually a couple of weeks back. So this has been something that's been in the works for quite some time. I really doubt that the Treasury Secretary that's being nominated right now is really under the real belief that this is just happening. It sounds like they're probably not trying to show their cards right now by pretending like they're really not sure what's going to happen. I think the plan's been in motion for maybe a couple of weeks now.
I think it most likely has been, and it sounds that as far as we were seeing, it seems as though the prior administration was pretty much running the marathon. You know, the what is it called, Matthew? When you carry that little stick when you're running a marathon, you hand it over to the next person. What's that little stick called?
I'm not even sure, man. I'm not a marathon runner. I don't know.
Me either. I don't know. But it seems as though they have passed the running stick, we'll call it that, onto the next administration. And the next administration hopefully will be sprinting towards the finish line. It seems as though that's generally the aim that both administrations are working towards so far. So this seems like it's largely a continuity of U.S. foreign policy and not a complete 100, the baton. Passing the baton on. There we go. Thank you, everyone, for reminding me about the name of that. Because there's also a city in the United States that has that in it, and it's actually this really cool town called Baton Rouge, and also that's Baton Rouge. Please don't anyone beat the hell out of me for that. That's from Baton Rouge. Please don't. But anyways, moving on from that, it is nice to know that that will be the case, and it also appears that there will be a more hostile approach that the United States takes towards Iranian proxies in the Middle East. And of course, once again, I have to remind everyone that at least for now, the situation on foreign policy in East Asia is unknown at the moment. But moving on from that, still very good news. That's what I generally want y'all to hear, because of course this channel doesn't really hold any bars when the situation is getting good or bad, but luckily, very much so luckily, there will be nothing that seems to be incredibly bad, at least for the moment, with Ukraine support. I know many people have been hearing that, and I know a lot of people have been hearing that because there are a lot of people out there with political objectives. We've always made it clear to y'all that we don't have a political objective on the channel, but there are many YouTube channels out there that have made it very clear that they have a certain political bias, and they are going to continuously put out information in support or against specific people because of their political leanings. If we had bad news to report to y'all, we would be reporting bad news. But so far, things are looking like they're actually going to be pretty good. They're going to be as good as they were in the last 4 years, if not better, in terms of foreign support. So it looks like the future is only going on the up and up, and we can only hope that that will be the case, because I would like to see the United States continues to reign supreme over its adversaries around the world and continues to support our allies and their heroic causes against these forces of evil. But nevertheless, moving on from that news and on into some other news that we've been able to hear in other areas, it's time for us to move on down into the middle of the East. Technically, some of it's in the Near East, because we already went through all of that just about on Sunday. What's the Near East, the Middle East, and the Far East? But we're still going to be getting into that technically Middle Eastern news that we have today, because we were also able to hear that the Russians have finally gotten a little bit of a win, but a bit of a loss. At least at the moment. And also, someone saying, "Oh, that was political." No, generally we try and have positive things to say about everyone in the political sphere. So, you know, we are always trying to say that hopefully they have the best interests of the country in mind, and things will only stay as good as they are or better. We said that under the last administration. We say it under this one. I know some people are probably going to be trying to pick at straws to try and say that we're getting political. But no, that's just generally what we do, and that's generally what we say. A lot of people always hear negative things. Before we move on into the Middle Eastern segment, I want to explain this. A lot of people always hear negative things about the United States, about how the country is spiraling downwards and it's truly doomed and it's finished. I heard that a lot in the last 4 years. I'm already hearing it now from other people. The truth is that the United States is only doing better and better every year in most categories. The United States is a country full of 360 million people. 360 million people of different kinds of backgrounds, different kinds of walks of life, but nevertheless share the same common experience of being a citizen of the United States of America. And while we always talk about these folks up in the White House and the Capitol, and a lot of people always have their attention on those specific hills within the capital of Washington, D.C., those people may as well be near mythical figures for the average American citizen who may never see these people outside of TV in their normal lives. Most Americans, through the hundreds of millions, are people who are working every single day, sometimes just to make ends meet, and they're wishing for a better and more successful life through their hard work and good efforts each and every single day. Those are the folks that I'm always talking to when I think about this channel, and when I think about covering news about what the United States is doing. It's undeserving and unrewarding for many American citizens to constantly be working as hard as they are every day, and for every single metric in this country to show that things are only improving and only getting better, to hear from folks who are disinterested and largely looking to make a buck off of telling people negative things, that the country is only going down further and further despite their best efforts and the hardest work that they put forward every day. Those are the folks that I'm concerned about when talking about the news on this channel for the United States, and that's why I always want to make sure that we report that things are going quite well, because generally the statistics do show that things are only getting better, and it's generally through the hard work and good efforts of the citizens of the United States that have been able to make that possible. But with that, I hope that does address that well. Also, one thing I have to address is someone said, why don't you say the name of the new president? We don't say names of presidents on this channel. It does not matter who is the president. It matters that there is a president. We never mention the last name of the former president. We are not going to be mentioning the name of the current president. It doesn't really matter who they are. It just matters that they're the president of the United States, and their decisions carry the same effort and presence that any president of the United States would. For this reason, we only say the president of the United States. We do not say the name of the current sitting president. But moving on from that, and moving into the area of the Middle East, it is time for us to get into some major news. And we have been able to hear that the Russian Federation has been dealt another blow today inside of Syria. And it appears that the Russian story in Syria is coming to its final end. We have been able to hear that the Russian Federation has had all of its docking and port rights revoked in the ports of Tartus and Latakia by the Syrian interim government today. A massive success for the Syrian interim government, as it appears that they are finally expelling the Russian Federation once and for all from the state of Syria, or largely the Republic or Emirate of Syria, whatever they may choose on becoming. However, right after that suspension of port and docking rights was issued by the Syrian interim government, we were able to hear that they are apparently allowing in Russian vessels for a limited time to begin the evacuation of Russian personnel and equipment from the port of Tartus to finally see them out once and for all. According to the information that we have right now, the Russian evacuation of Tartus has finally begun, and after being in a holding pattern for over a week, the Sparta II, one of the cargo vessels that's supposed to carry most of the Russian equipment home, has finally been allowed to dock at Tartus to evacuate the Russian equipment from the base. And this comes the day after Syria canceled Russia's 49-year lease of the port of Tartus. This is
kind of weird. Why would they let them dock after they literally just canceled the lease? That doesn't make much sense. It's like you just told them you can never come back. We're ending our relationship with you permanently, meaning Syria to Russia. So why would you say, okay, just bring the Sparta on in and load everything up? It's like you just canceled the lease. Like, what sense does that make?
And I would have to say, I think that what it was supposed to be is that they were allowing them into the port under protest. It's, because they don't want the Russian military to stay in Syria, and they're not going to end up killing them, because then the Russians might end up bombing Syria again. So what they're wanting to do by doing this is say, we hate the Russians and we never want them back, but y'all can come into the ports. It's not going to be a friendly welcome, and y'all need to get your stuff and leave. I think that's generally what the approach was by the interim government, to make it very clear to the Russian Federation they're not entering this port under a welcome flag. They're entering it under a very unfriendly circumstance to simply get their equipment and leave. I think that's why they did it that way, because I can't really think of another way to make that make sense, rather than it's supposed to make the Russian Federation understand they're not entering that port because of a sign of friendship from the interim government. They are entering it under an unfriendly position, that they just want the Russian military out, and they want this chapter of Syrian history to end once and for all.
Maybe that's it too, or maybe they paid them some money to come get the equipment out, because I wouldn't put that past them, because money pretty much speaks to everybody, and the new Syrian regime is not exempt from that. I'm sure they would love a little extra cash on top of what they're going to receive from the West. So maybe that's part of it, but I think you may be right ultimately, though. I think they just want the Russians out probably, and of course, there were Russian soldiers still left there along with the equipment, so they need to get their guys out, and plus, they need to get the equipment out as well. So I wonder how much they're actually going to be able to evacuate from the port before the Syrians like finally have enough of them and say you're going to have to leave right now.
I think they're going to be able to get most, if not all of it out. I think they'll actually be able to get all of the equipment and personnel out, because if there's any equipment left, it just continues to keep the Russians' door open to where they can keep on coming down there and making an issue about it. Even if it's just a company's worth of equipment, they'll probably still make an issue out of it. So I think at this point, the Syrian interim government has made it clear they're not docking at this port under good times. They're entering just to get their equipment out and leave, and they never want to see them return. I think that's what the case is.
That may be so. Whatever the case is, like, I'm glad they're just like kicking them to the curb like that. Really, honestly, if I was in the Syrian government's position, I would have personally taken that Russian equipment and said, "You're not getting any of it back." It's not like they're going to show up and start fighting the Syrian government. The Russians really can't do that, and they're stuck right now off the port. Considering everything that's happened in their history between Syria and Russia, I would have taken the equipment personally. I'm not sure why they're really giving it back, unless they're just like, just take it, get lost. We don't ever want to see you again. That's probably the easiest way to deal with it. But at the same time, though, considering that Israel went in and bombed a ton of Syria's equipment, that was stuff that they could have taken from the Russians and used in their own military.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing about it, but I really do think they're just trying to go with the easiest thing, because they're probably thinking, look, we don't want to get embroiled in the Russians bombing us maybe with a strategic bomber or two, because we're in the middle of trying to build up a new government. So they're like, let's just get them out of here and get back to focusing on creating a longer lasting form of a Syrian government inside of the country. I think that's what they're most likely working towards, because the way they're doing this, it's making it very, like, they're showing the Russians, we never want y'all back, but at the same time, we don't want any trouble from y'all, so just get your crap and leave. It's almost honestly like what someone would do in the middle of a divorce, honestly. They're just like, get your crap and go, but we don't want you to think you're welcome here. That honestly is what it's coming off as.
Yeah, kind of so. And I guess the Russians were the bad spouse, I guess you could say. They're having to get their stuff and their toothbrush and head on out, I guess you could say. But it's a good sight, though. Honestly, I hate to see the Russians showing back up with the Sparta to get some of their stuff out. I was hoping that they wouldn't be able to get anything out. But considering the stuff is sitting right there on the port, I guess, like you're saying, the Syrians just thought, just let them have it, I guess. They're being extremely nice to the Russians, I will say that. Like, it does show that the Syrian regime is not that crazy, the one that just came in, or otherwise they wouldn't be sort of taking the middle route, the moderate version of the decision here, and letting them have it back.
Yeah, it doesn't really seem like they're exacting any of that kind of revolutionary justice that you would usually see a new government bring forward against people that they, maybe despise or even hate. There's none of that. It's really incredibly calm. It's almost like they're doing it in a legal approach. They're like, you're not welcome, get your crap and leave. Like, that's literally what they're doing. I gotta say, that's a very interesting sign again. And I have to say, once again, not to make everything sound positive tonight, a very positive sign, though, for what the future of Syria may bring. It looks like they're going to be a fairly legalistic form of government that doesn't really try to conduct overtly hostile actions as their go-to, or really their just normal modus of operation. It really seems like they're going to go with a much more relaxed and modest approach, and just go forward with trying to be a much more civil and legal country, at least on the domestic end, which will be a very good thing for them in the long run, and is once again showing that they're moving more towards a Western direction with their government building than a more Iranian direction with their government building. So this is a very good thing. Also, once again,
man, if it was Iran in charge of the place, they would have stolen that equipment so fast they would have never even had a chance to get it to the port. They would have stolen it so quick.
Dude, man, like the Russians would have shown up to their little base at Kobani, and they'd be like, we never got to hear these guys made it to Tartus. What happened to it? And they go in there, and like all of the engines and the tires would be gone. Like everything would be on cinder blocks. And the Iranians would have built a brand new tunnel and put all the like spare parts inside of it. And they would have that, oh, yeah, playing as they show the tunnel. It'd be like revolutionary.
Just seeing people laying tarps out and throwing engines on tarps and dragging it down to their like underground like dens and stuff like that they've got that they're showing off on camera. Just don't mind us just taking a couple of engines down below.
Dude, like the Iranians be like, listen, we don't like for the women to strip, but we do like to strip a nice truck. Like, and then they go and they just start taking stuff out of it. It's like that's what they would be doing. But beyond that, it looks like the Syrian interim government is much more civil. So I'm very happy to see that, and it is once again showing us that the interim government is trying to make very clear and concerted efforts to move into the Western fold compared to any other. And of course, they're not moving back into the Russian fold. That's quite obvious. They're kicking them out under prejudice. Well, not under prejudice. They're kicking the Russians out and showing that there's some pretty decent prejudice and they're holding back a good bit. As far as the Iranians are trying to be hand in hand with the Russians at this point. So I don't believe that they'll be moving towards their sphere anytime soon either. It looks like they're entirely destined at this point to move into the Western sphere. So with that in mind, a lot of people are wondering what is going to be going on with Syria revoking Russia's license to dock at their ports, and will they allow Russia to retrieve their equipment? And it looks like 47% of folks are saying that the Russians will generally be blocked, so almost half of everyone's saying that. Some others are saying that Russia will be able to get their stuff, and some people are saying only time will tell, maybe? Not with a V.
I misspelled it.
Yeah, that's all maybe. I was like, maybe? Man, it's the U.S. Navy. But beyond that, Matthew, what are people saying, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so 47% of the audience said no, Russia will generally be blocked from getting their stuff from the Syrian ports, while 28% said yes, Russia will be able to get their stuff, and 19% said only time will tell, maybe. So on this one, I would honestly say that it sounds like the Syrian government, like the enforcer said, is taking the more moderate approach here, and they're going to let the Russians get their stuff out. I hate to hear that, but that is probably the most easy option to take, honestly, because of course the Russians could decide to try to take it by force. I really think that would be unlikely, but they could try to do it, and that might cause future problems. And it sounds like Syria wants to turn the page on the Russian chapter, and they're simply going to let the stuff be taken and get rid of the Russians once and for all. So that's what's happening here. They're getting the toothbrush in the sink. But enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say, it appears that it's just the end of the time for the Russians to be there. I actually do think that the Russians are going to get all their stuff out. Syria doesn't want them there anymore. It's very clear. They want them to be gone. They're going to get their stuff out, but it's not going to be under any kind of a welcome pretense. It's going to be one that's very clearly unfriendly, unwelcoming. They just want them to be there for the limited time that they're there and get out. That's it. That's why they revoked the docking rights before they even docked, so that way they knew that this wasn't anything where you could take your time. You need to hurry up. You're on the interim government's time now. You're not on Assad's time. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And another interesting thing happened just a little bit south of this, inside of southern Lebanon. As many of y'all will know, the Israeli war against Hezbollah is still going on inside of southern Lebanon, much to the dismay of many. Although, in my opinion, it makes complete sense. But when I say that, Matthew knows the context. There's some people that we knew that were from Lebanon, and interestingly enough, they were run out by Hezbollah, and then they complained when they were bombing Hezbollah. I was like, what side are y'all on? But beyond that, we were able to see that there has been a proposition by the Israeli government to take the Russian captured weapons, some of them pictured here, and provide them to Ukraine. The Israelis really have no use for this stuff. This isn't the Israel of the 1970s and 60s, where they would sometimes convert Soviet equipment into their own IDF forces. This isn't really that time anymore. Largely, what they do is they just destroy most of this equipment, so it's practically useless for them. So the idea is that they could give this over to Ukraine, and we also were able to hear this from the Embassy of Ukraine in the State of Israel, and allow the Ukrainians to use it against the Russians in the war effort, considering that a lot of Ukrainian and Russian equipment was made during Soviet times and is largely interchangeable. So for this reason, fairly interesting thing, and good to hear that the Israelis are wanting to provide this kind of equipment to the state of Ukraine. We don't really know how much there is in terms of number. That's a little bit of an interesting thing. We actually do not know how much Russian equipment the Israelis have been able to capture, but considering the size of Hezbollah and the amount of weapons that they generally have, I'm assuming that it cannot be that much. It's probably enough to equip a brigade for maybe a month, but it won't be much more than that. So while it's a great gesture by the Israelis, it isn't anything that's going to be truly war-changing in terms of supply availability. But nevertheless, a lot of people are talking about this. And Israel is offering, once again to recap this, to send captured Russian weapons to Ukraine. And should Israel send their own weapons? And a lot of people are saying yes, Israel should send their own. And Some people are saying, no, the captured weapons will work. And others are saying, I'm a little indifferent on this. And some are saying that they're unsure. But Matthew, what are people thinking about this? And what are you thinking about it as well? Do you think that they should give their own weapons, their own Israeli-made weapons? Or do you think that they should give the Russian weapons?
All right, so now that Israel is doing a very good thing by sending the captured Hezbollah Russian-made weapons back to Ukraine for them to use in the war, of course, that's a very good thing. And once again, I want to reiterate, Israel simply offered that. Right now, Ukraine's not accepted the offer, but I highly doubt that Ukraine is going to deny getting free weapons. That would be a crazy thing to do, so they'll probably get them. But the question is, should Israel send their own custom-manufactured weapons? So 51% said yes, Israel should send their own, while 40% said no, the captured weapons will work, and 6% said, I'm indifferent on this. And this is something that Israel's been doing for a little while now. They actually are somewhat reserved when it comes to sending their own stuff. And in fact, they were talking about retiring some piece of equipment a couple of months back, and the U.S. actually told them, maybe I ought to send that over there to Ukraine and let them have it instead of destroying that piece of equipment and scrapping it. And I'm not sure if Israel ever sent it or not. So Israel is very, very reserved on sending weapons. I'm not really sure why that is, but I think Israel should offer some of their own if they can afford to lose it. And honestly, Israel can't afford to lose it because they're a very wealthy country and manufacture a lot of weapons. So I'm generally with the 50%. As long as it doesn't violate OPSEC and as long as Israel can afford it, I would say send some to Ukraine to help them out. But Enforcer, what say you?
Also, really quickly, I would have to say, just a real quick note, you cannot say that Ukraine is losing when your last name is Simpson. Like, do not. Like, it's like, don't say that.
Oh.
But moving on from that, I would have to say that that I believe that the captured weapons will largely work. I don't believe that the Israelis should give their own weapons, because once again, we do have to remember that the Israelis are dealing with their own situation with Iranian proxy forces that still is ongoing, at least in terms of what's going on with Hezbollah. So it'd be a little bit weird for them in the middle of an active war, for the large part, to start disarming themselves and then providing weapons to the Ukrainians. I think it would make a lot more sense for them to hand over the captured Russian weapons to Ukraine, because every Ukrainian soldier already has default training with those kinds of weapon systems, and so it wouldn't really be impossible to just send those and immediately have them for use on the front lines, as compared to Israeli weaponry, where a decent amount of training would have to be provided. Even on a system like a bullpup, similar to a Tavor, there would have to be a little bit of training for them to be acclimated to how the Tavor works. And of course, the Ukrainians have their own bullpups, but each bullpup is a little bit different than the other, so there would have to be a little limited amount of training and familiarization, which you wouldn't have to have with captured Hezbollah weapons. They're practically all Russian-made. They have RPG-7s, AK-74s, AKMs, also ATGMs, anti-tank weaponry produced by the Russian Federation. All of that, weaponry that was produced by the Russian Federation, but is still of old Soviet designs. So really, you could just send that straight to Ukraine and right on to the front, and there's no training necessary for any of it. With anything Israeli, there would have to be a decent amount of training, and then it would take a good while to integrate that into the Ukrainian military, and then only limited units would be able to use it, because most likely only a small amount of the Ukrainian army would be trained on how to use Israeli weaponry, and those would only be the units that are issued any form of an Israeli weapon. So for that reason, I think that the Russian weaponry that's been captured in southern Lebanon would probably do pretty good on its own, just being provided to them.
Yeah, maybe so. It could be. Me personally, I think Israel produces a surplus of equipment. And of course, they are fighting a war, of course. So they need to make sure they have their own stockpile, adjusted properly. But they're not fighting, let's say Russia. Even though Russia is not a great fighting force, the proxy forces in the Middle East are even lower than that, in my opinion. They're literally just scrapping with Israel. So they still have to worry about Iran, of course, firing a ton of rockets into their territory. But outside of that, though, they generally have everything under control for the most part. So if they had a surplus and they had things that were sort of like, I guess you could say, quasi-Western that Ukraine already knew how to operate, like air defense systems or something like that, that might be something they could send if they could afford to actually send it and not create a deficit for themselves.
I would agree, but still, I think that the Russian weapons would be the easiest thing to hand over at this point. But something that isn't easy, that isn't good? Like, while we've had a lot of good news today, we have been able to hear something, we've known that this is inevitable, but it's finally starting to happen. This takes us on over into East Asia. Many people know that we've talked a lot about East Asia, about North Korea, about South Korea, oddly enough, for a while now, and also about Taiwan and the Communist Chinese and their constant, really harassment of Taiwan. And then there was a little thing that we posted on Twitter from some guy who was in the Air Force, and he was like, Operation Joint Sword was the largest maritime exercise since World War II, which is just not true because there's been like a million larger things than that. But anyways, getting on from that, we have been able to see that within Beijing, which is the capital of China, for those who may or may not know, within Beijing, oddly enough, man, Beijing isn't really that big. I was just looking at it. I was like, most of this is, or I don't even know what the hell that is. That's like commie block hell out here within this area. Look at that. It just goes on and on and on. Oh.
Also, the way they designed the central part of the city is like in a big square or something. It kind of looks unoriginal.
Well, you know what's crazy? It actually was. Like, that's the craziest thing. The entire city of Beijing, which used to be called Peking, was within this road right here, the second ring. It was all within this road area right here. Let me go see if I can show you. Map of Peking in 1900. Yep, here we go. Yeah, I can actually show this to you exactly. Oh,
Also,
dang,
is the place that starts with a T right in the center of Beijing, by the way? You know, the square?
Yeah, it's this one right here.
Aha. So that's why they built it around the square.
Maybe, like, maybe, but beyond that, this is the map of Beijing as it was seen in 1900. You can actually see that this second ring road right here exists where the former walls did. They tore down the walls, and in the absence of the wall, they built a large avenue, which you can see right here, this one. But that used to be the city walls. So everything that existed in Beijing during 1900 existed within here. Everything else is from post-1900 when the city started to grow out, and especially after 1949 when Beijing was declared the capital of the People's Republic of China. But yes.
Also, by the way, like their road system, like I'm not really praising China's construction because, of course, we know how like very short-lived these things last. But their road system was wild looking, like very wide lanes. Like zoom back into their highways for a second. That was extremely large highways. Look at that. That's honestly crazy.
I don't know, not really. Let me, however, counter Dallas, Texas. Let's go look at an interstate here. Now that's wild. No, that is wild.
I don't know. I think maybe it's because these are like really faded out over here. I don't know how China keeps their like interstates so like fresh looking like that, but it looks bigger. Do we have a street view in China, by the way?
Sadly, no. The People's Republic of China doesn't allow for maybe there is one, but it's not going to be like, we can move up and down the road. It's probably just going to be right on it.
Zoom back into a interstate or something, and let's see the roads.
Yes, the great. Here's one of the gates from the old walls. Like when they tore them down, I guess they kept a couple of gates. But there is the highway in the background.
Interesting.
Well,
I will say that. Oh well, the little bit we can barely see here, it looks like they keep it clean at least. Like, but this isn't really a highway. This is more of like just a roadway. We can barely see the interstate, so I really can't say.
But their interstate, it's not that big. I mean, we have way bigger ones here in America. And I think it looks black, Matthew, because they're probably using something called a Laofeng 9, which is like extremely toxic. And if you breathe around it, your lungs burn or something like that. It's probably something along those lines because, everything in China has like no safety regulations at all. It's just like, shit, put sulfur in it. Like they'll like pave a road and it's like the 1% sulfur content or some crazy thing like that. But still, it's also, what is this? Traffic hell right here. Look at this. Yeah, we have 6 lanes that then intersect into 2. Like, this is a great idea. This is wonderful. Nothing could go wrong with that.
It's like a hybrid, like roundabout type thing. I've never seen anything like that with like traffic structure. That's kind of weird. It's confusing too. Like I don't understand how it works.
I can already see I can understand why there's so many like road fatalities in China because the roads don't make sense. That's probably the issue. Also, let's check out the Chinese Communist Party simply does not allow us to see the beauty and glory of a communist McDonald's. Unfortunately, we cannot see it. What beauty in west of Jizhuitan? What is? Oh, wait a minute. This is like a park. Huh.
Kind of a nice park actually. Yeah, not too bad looking. It's also snowing at some point.
That looks like clouds. It's actually industrial smog. Like it's like that's like probably the case. But let's
Man,
see.
that's an industrial grade snow.
And also, by the way, I forgot to tell you, everything in the Beijing map is off shifted. Like they do it deliberately, because you can see that the highway is actually up here on the map, but it's actually about a couple of 100 yards south. And every single
What's the
thing,
reason?
I don't know, but they do that everywhere in China on the map. Like you can come to the United States and the roads are like dead on exactly where they are, but like even right here, you can see that the roadway is actually about a couple of 100 yards down. The entire map of China is upshifted. Hmm?
Did I just see that correctly? Did that say toll road? Did I see that? Zoom back in for a second.
Yes, that's a toll road.
Doesn't that go against like communism to have a toll road or something like that? Like, isn't that a capitalist thing?
Back in 1979, the Chinese government the Chinese government found out that a centrally planned true Marxist economy just does not work. So in 1981, they rolled forward a limited capitalist model in some cities, including Shanghai specifically, which was the first one to implement a limited free market kind of a system. And the Chinese found out that it was wildly successful. So then they pretty much rolled forward a state-controlled capitalist free market economy system that was still largely controlled by the state but allowed somewhat semi-private enterprises throughout the entirety of China. That's the explanation for that toll road, that express toll road, is that some company in China, one of those enterprises that's still somewhat state controlled, built that expressway as a money-making operation.
Man, I'll just never understand China. Like they took the like idealistic bits out of communism that people generally are attracted to some extent. Not me, obviously not me. I want to make that clear. But some people are attracted to those idealistic parts of communism. Of everybody really doesn't own much of anything. Everybody kind of gets a communal way of living, and they took that away and they kept the part about controlling the people. And then they brought in capitalism, make sure that the government can get rich at the same time, but yet they don't really let the people enjoy that to the full extent. So kind of interesting. China's just really self-serving for the government 100%.
Dude, they're like, well, you know, the thing is that's still interesting is that China isn't Marxist-Leninist like the Soviet Union was, which was more closer to the true source material of Marxism than anything. China is actually Maoist, which is a totally different form of communism, which really didn't care at least too much about the communist side. It just really cared about removing foreign interference from China and then creating a self-sufficient, successful China that would not be reliant on external powers. That was really what Maoism was about. Kind of like how the communist philosophy in Vietnam, which I believe is called Menism, named after Ho Chi Minh. It also really is less about actually being communist and more about removing foreign influence from their country. So that's kind of what.
Honestly, to me, it just sounds like China basically took the best bits of every government system that would benefit solely the government and the people that run the country and said, you basically F you to the citizens, and took all those bits away of these government systems that were generally supposed to level things out between the people and the government. That's basically what it sounds like. That explains why the Chinese ruling class is so rich, because they took those elements like that. So yeah, China literally made it a hellhole for the citizens, and they made it a paradise for the government.
Exactly. It's literally the perfect tenets of Maoism. It's literally what it was kind of going to get turned into at some point, and they finally did it. So, you know, it's a little interesting there. And also, Kenneth Prosek said, China always had internal capitalism. No, they didn't. At least during the earlier periods, they tried to implement a centrally planned economy, just like the Soviet Union, and then the Great Leap Forward was probably the worst argument against that, at least even inside of China, because they killed 40 million people through the poor management of the state for the large part. And so the Chinese government actually started to exile Mao from his own inner circle, because they were all like, yeah, he's getting old and delusional and he just killed like 40 million people, so we're gonna have to get him out of here. So they kind of just slowly started to excise him from the government, just kind of removed him for the large part, slowly yet surely. They still treated him like a hero and a martyr, though. And then finally, when he died, they were like, okay, we need to drop all this goofy shit and just go straight on to like limited capitalism, because that's the only thing that's going to work. It's clear that that's the only thing that works. And so that's why they kind of moved on to that. That's the best explanation I could give. But no, they were never limitedly capitalist, especially during the Great Leap Forward. They actually completely removed cooking utensils from people's homes. The only place you could get food was in a communal canteen, as they were called, which is where they built literally cafeterias in every single town, village, and city throughout all of China, and that's the only place you could go and eat. And there was no rationing. They just said, eat whatever you want, and it's free. So, of course, people overindulged, and then some official said, hey, look, man, like, this harvest really wasn't that good, and also the policies we brought forward of collective farming, along with the overconsumption, are not doing us well, and it looks like we will not have enough food to make it to the next harvest of next year, and that harvest is also going to be reduced because everyone's burning their tools right now to try and make shitty steel that just doesn't work. And then Mao said, I don't like the sound of that. And then people got scared to tell him that it wasn't going well, so they just kind of hid that from him. And then that's when the great famine started in the Great Leap Forward, is by the next year, no one was hardly producing any food, people are eating too much, and there was also no agricultural implements to be able to grow food with. So literally 40 million people just starved over the next 2 years, and then finally someone had the guts to tell Mao, people are dying, man. Like, people are starving to death in the millions in the countryside. And then he was like, oh, well, this is terrible. He's like, we need to stop that right now. Who did that? And they were like, you did. And he was like, me? And he's like, no, I didn't do that. And then he slowly got removed from the inner circle. But that's the story of the Great Leap Forward in a nutshell.
It always kills me when people will ask, why does China call that the Great Leap Forward when literally it was like going backwards? Well, China didn't say what they were leaping forward into. Like they literally were taking a great leap forward into hell, basically. Like they didn't ever specify a great leap into what, and it wasn't anything good, obviously. So no. Like the Great Leap was terrible.
No. The Great Leap was terrible, but let me explain why it was called that. That's what it was called in government sloganing. It was like the 5-year plan in the Soviet Union, or the New Deal under FDR's government in the United States. It was supposed to, well, the New Deal in America was supposed to get Americans back to work and get them into good paying jobs. The 5-year plan in the Soviet Union was supposed to rapidly industrialize the Soviet Union and improve the quality of life of the working Soviet citizen. The Great Leap Forward was supposed to rapidly industrialize China and also collectivize farming, so that way in the end, according to what their plan was, there would be more food for everyone, and they'd also have more consumer goods for everyone as well, because China would be industrialized enough to produce them, because they would be making enough steel. But none of that happened. People just starved, and it was a complete failure. But they still call it the Great Leap Forward because it's kind of it's kind of the humor in it all, in a morbid way, is that it was supposedly supposed to be the Great Leap Forward, but it ended up being the Great Leap to the grave for millions of people in the end.
Yeah, basically so. But it's just like people were saying in the chat. I knew it was propaganda already. I was just making a joke there of it a little bit about the Great Leap into what? The Great Leap into hell, basically. But yeah, China's not been doing great. But anyways, man, we're like deep down a rabbit hole somehow.
Yeah.
We got to move on.
Yeah, we're deep into it because we talked about China. But beyond that, China is going to be deepening economic ties with Russia beyond outside this whole economic rabbit hole. We can see this awkward little exchange here happening in between Putin and Xi Jinping. He did not wave, dissing on him. But anyways, that's the end of the clip right there. Awkward silence. But China is ready to take relations with Russia to a new height in 2025, according to Xi Jinping. And relations between Russia and China are self-sufficient and do not depend on the global situation, according to Putin. So it seems as though China is trying to bring the Russians even further in as a resource bulk for cheap lumber and oil products, although the oil products are in a considerable shortage at this point. But anyways, moving on from that, it is now time for us to get on back into Ukraine and all of the news that we have inside of Ukraine, and there's a lot of it. But before we get into that, I do have to make sure that we address a couple of questions from the chat. So Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so let's jump into our first super chat of the night, which goes to a longtime channel legend. It is David Dornblaser, who puts in a very generous $100 donation. And thank you very much, David, for the $100 donation. And thank you very much for helping to keep us running. And David said, greetings, enforcers and LSA. And I'm a little late night, but I wanted to support the channel.
And thank you for the massive support, David Dornblaser, and supporting this channel and helping it to keep on running. And I gotta say, I thank you so much for being here with us tonight and supporting the channel massively. I got to thank you incredibly for that. And I hope you've been having a good time tonight listening to the news and the little rabbit holes that we had, because we always love to be able to cover the news for each and every single one of y'all. And we thank you so much once again, Durham Blaster, for the massive support. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we would not be able to make this channel possible, keep it running, and make sure that these streams are ad-free and sponsor-free. But of course, a huge thanks to you so much once again, because I cannot say this enough. I cannot say it enough, truly. If it was not for folks like you, we would never be able to make this channel possible and be able to keep the lights on and keep working on this thing. Folks don't even have to support this channel, yet y'all do, and you'll continue to make this thing a reality. And so with that, we are on to the next one, but a massive thanks once again.
Yes, indeed. And our next one here goes to Veteran RN, who's also a longtime channel viewer. And thank you very much, Veteran RN, for that very generous $50 support and helping to keep the coffee brewing, the lights on, and also the editing. I guess that makes kind of sense. But thank you very much for that support. And they said, keep it up, keep going, and always wear a hard hat for safety.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support, and thank you for helping this channel to keep on running, and thank you for supporting the hard hat for safety. We always got to have a hard hat on around here. You never know when some big idea is going to come crashing down on you and break your neck. And we've had big ideas. I mean, I'm not wanting to spoil anything for y'all. Matthew kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, but Matthew's been cooking up another one of those Enforcer exclusive documentaries. And I don't mean to hype it up a lot, but it looks like it's sizing up to be the best one we've made so far, interestingly enough. And
oh wow, that's a big goal right there. I hope it meets it.
that's a big goal. If it doesn't meet it, we're going to have a great leap forward in the studio. But beyond that, oh no, I'm just kidding. But beyond that, it's looking really good. We're planning on it coming out sometimes towards the later end of this week. Of course, we're not guaranteeing that those will be a regular occurrence or anything like that, because we already have our hands full of largely just running this channel on the day-to-day. But hopefully y'all will like it a lot, because it is a very good one, and it's on a very interesting topic. I don't know if Matthew wants to tell y'all about the topic yet, but one thing I can't...
I'll tell him about it if you want. You want me to give him a little preview of it?
Sure, go ahead, yeah.
So the video that's coming out, because of course we've been talking about the sanctions on Russia and how the economic collapse is going to take place for actually at least a week now, really in detail. And that made me think, let me make an actual like feature-length documentary, about 10 minutes long or so, maybe a little bit longer than that before it's finished, about how that collapse is actually going to take place from the whole situation through and what NATO's plan is to actually collapse of the Russian economy. So I've done a ton of research. I've compiled all the video evidence showing you the people that are currently taking charge of the United States, telling us about how that plan is going to work, and also showing you the plans and how the U.S. is going to get around the Russian shadow fleet and things like that. So it's a really, I think it's just shaping up to be a pretty solid video so far, and we're improving our editing skills like tenfold on this video. So that's been something we've been trying to work on, is upping the production quality, because last time my video was honestly like, it wasn't bad. Like it looked like the audience reception was pretty good, but the editing was like a PowerPoint presentation. This time it's not going to be like that. It's going to be a full-blown like mini documentary. So it's going to be coming out later this week around Friday or Thursday or so, or whichever day that we do not have a news video that we're usually doing. We'll probably release it on that day. So it's going to be pretty good. Like I can't wait for y'all to see it.
And also, we already are starting to cook up another one in the background. Hopefully this first one will be well received, and this one is going to be made by me. Although I do have to give credit to Matthew. He was the one who came up with this idea, but still, I'm going to be the one ending up largely creating it and putting it out. But this one, the second video, is going to be on the United States and Panama. As many people have heard, there is some sort of a reinvigorated interest by the U.S. government to reclaim the Panama Canal, originally built by the United States, but handed over to Panama in 1979 in a largely a treaty or some form of an exchange to improve relations with the nation of Panama. Many people have been talking about it, and it seems to be a really popular kind of a topic, so we actually wanted to cover some of the info about the Panama Canal, why the United States has some sort of a reinvigorated interest in reclaiming the canal, and why it appears that the Panamanian government is not wanting to give up the canal at all. And also some other things as well, including some climate change issues which have seen the Panama Canal start to decline in importance due to a lack of usable water. They're having to greatly reduce the amount of passage licenses that are given out, meaning that the Panama Canal is starting to shrink in significance compared to its historical all-time highs, where nearly 60 ships were passing through the canals in the course of a month. But still, we are wanting to cover that as well, because it seems like that's a really big topic right now, and loads of people would be highly interested in a video topic like that, and seeing what that would look like, or at least some of the additional details and everything else involved. Of course, with that
That's
being
going to be a big one right there. Like that Panama video, I can guarantee that's going to be bigger than the one I'm putting out. Like that's going to be a popular one.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. It's going to be very, very fun to do because all of y'all know I'm a history buff, so there will be history involved. It's not going to be like a documentary on the history of the canal, but I will explain, how the U.S. built the Panama Canal, our involvement with the Panama Canal, how it was handed over to the Panamanian government, and a whole bunch of other things, and then how we're going to get the canal back, or if we are going to get a canal back, what are we going to do to try and get it back? There's going to be all kinds of stuff there, because it's a very interesting subject, and there's actually been a lot of American-Panamanian relations in the past that we can largely look at and kind of see how this may end up turning out or how it'll go. So that will be fairly interesting. And also, Sarge said the oceans aren't the same height. Yeah, that's actually true. The Pacific Ocean, I believe, is a few feet higher than the Atlantic. But at the same time, though, the reason why there's the lock system and everything is because they have to bring the ships up to Gatun Lake, because Gatun Lake, I believe, is about 30 feet, 40 feet higher than the both oceans, and then they pass through Gatun Lake and then down into the Pacific, or the other way around. But beyond that, I hope that does address that well. I hope that gives y'all a lot to look forward to. And of course, a massive shout out once again to Veteran RN for your support and helping this channel to keep on running. And hopefully we will be able to make sure that we are able to make y'all proud with the incoming documentary video by Enforcer Matt, and then the next documentary video that will be made by none other than the Enforcer. And so with that, we are on to the last question of the segment, and then we're going to be moving on into the rest of the news. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right. And also, by the way, David Long put in a really good video idea in the live chat. He said, will you guys also do a video on Greenland? That's actually going to be my next video project, David. I'm actually going to take that one up because that's actually a really good idea. So thank you very much for suggesting that, because I really didn't think of that one. And that would probably be a good one to explain why Greenland is strategically important for our global relations with the United States. Not whether or not we support taking Greenland or not. We're not going to touch that. But simply to explain why it is important would probably be a good one. But anyways, moving on to our last super chat of the segment. This one goes to Gerald Everett, who puts in a very generous $50 donation. And thank you very much, Gerald, for that support. He said, what are the United States' reasons for going after the canal zone? Is it the same as Putin's reasons for going after Ukraine? And do you think that Putin will put him up to it so Russia could use that as a propaganda point?
Let's see. It's an interesting kind of a thing, why we would want to get back the Panama Canal. Interestingly enough, the Panama Canal actually makes an exorbitant amount of money. Passage rights or passage licenses are fairly expensive to attain, and for this reason, it was a moneymaker for the U.S. government for a while until we handed it over to Panama in 1979. The reason why we handed it over to Panama in 1979 was because our diplomatic relations with Panama were deteriorating, and we also really didn't want to have to continue to manage the canal. So for this reason, we handed it back over to the Well, we didn't hand it back over to the Panamanians. We handed it over to the Panamanians because the Panamanians have never controlled the canal up until 1979. The area that the canals were built in, both on the Atlantic and Pacific side, were actually owned and built by the United States back when the canal was originally being constructed. American workers were brought in from the United States specifically for the project, and a large amount of private contractors and the Army Corps of Engineers built the canal system. We managed it for the entirety of its existence up until 1979, then we handed it over to the Panamanians. The reason why we're wanting it back is that supposedly the People's Republic of China is starting to have a lot more influence on the country of Panama in recent times, which is technically being justified as a concern about the future of the canal. There's some other things involved as well. Generally, is strategic interests of controlling the canal, because right now, with the Panamanians, we actually have a treaty that gives U.S. warships the right of way, if they are small enough, to be able to pass through the canal with priority expedience, meaning as soon as they arrive, they're immediately sent through the canal. However, that treaty could be rescinded in the future. It is just a treaty. And for this reason, there may be another strategic interest involved in making sure that U.S. warships are able to surge from the East Coast into the Pacific if there was the outbreak of war with China. And especially considering that some people are saying that the Panamanian government may be moving more towards the People's Republic of China, it is entirely possible that the Chinese could proceed in action or a conflict in the Pacific by having the Panamanians largely void the treaty and stop U.S. warships from having the largely emergency rite of passage through the Panama Canal, meaning that U.S. warships would have to take the long and arduous journey all the way around South America into the Pacific instead of straight through the canal. So there are strategic and economic reasons that the United States would want the canal, but there's also some considerable interest as to why Panama is not going to give up the canal at all. We most likely will have to get involved in an armed conflict to retake the canal, because the canal is the only reason that Panama is not a third world country like every single one surrounding them economically. The Panama Canal is the lifeline of the Panamanian economy. Actually, let me go show you all the GDP of Panama. Let's see here. Here we go. So you can actually see about the time in 1979 that they got the canal, and Panama's economy was at around $3.7 billion. Then it climbed pretty quickly on up to 6. They had a little economic recession during the early 90s. But then since then, it's been rapidly skyrocketing as they've been absolutely raking in the money off of the canal. So they don't really want to give it back, because if they give it back, one of their biggest moneymakers and really economic drivers for growth is going to be completely closed down, because this canal makes money for the Panamanian government, which actually runs and manages the canal. The government then uses the money that they get from that canal to reinvest into local industries inside of the country of Panama, producing better paying jobs and giving people a better quality of life because they're able to afford more. So it's actually greatly improved the quality of living in the nation of Panama for them to have the canal. So they aren't going to want to give it up, because they're not going to want to see the government's main investment tool being ripped away from them. But the United States also wants it because of strategic interests. Some people say the canal belongs to Panama. Some other people say that it belongs to the United States. The answer is a little tricky. Technically, it's our canal. We built it and we managed it up until 1979, but because of the treaty, it is Panama's. So if we go and retake it, we're largely retaking it by force. So that's kind of the situation with that. But still, I hope that does address that fairly well, and I thank you so much once again for the support and hoping this channel to keep on running. And I hope that explains both sides as to why Panama would want to keep the canal and why the United States would want to get the canal back. But still, thank you so much once again, Gerald Everett. I don't know why that was so hard for me to say. Thank you for the support, Gerald Everett, in helping this channel to keep on running. Thank you for throwing in your 5th super chat ever. That is a massive piece of support and helps us to keep this channel running so that we can keep talking about all kinds of interesting things here on this channel, including the Panama Canal, which we will make a much more in-depth and more interesting video on here in the future. But with that, it is time for us to move on back into the news. The Ukraine war news, specifically. And now, let us move on into what's been going on around here. In the Kursk Oblast, we have been able to see that a Russian attack was attempted again and turned away quite quickly by the 36th Marine Brigade using this interesting weapon called a javelin. There it goes. And in a second, there it is. It looks like it caused a critical ammo detonation, and that tank is now gone.
It went kaboom.
And we can see the remnants of the tank kind of cooking down there, sparking even.
It's like a volcano with some lava.
Man, that thing's more than a oh, that thing's like a small bomb that's just cooking down there. And you see them firing another javelin.
Man, that was a crazy angle. Like, I know the javelin has that momentary like rocket like fuse phase or something where it takes a minute to launch.
The delay.
But that was crazy. The delay. It was like freaking just lobbing a rock out of the tube.
Yeah, it's always wild to watch that. Also, holy moly, is that that looks like a T-80 or a T-90? Can't tell, but it's blazing. And let's see.
It is blazing.
Man, UAV blazers. But still.
Whoa, man, you're doxing ourselves, man. What are you doing?
Man, we already told everyone we went to UAV like 90 times.
Right.
Yeah, like it's like I'm not doxing because we already did it. But here comes another javelin. There it goes.
Made in Troy, Alabama, by the way. A taste of Alabama for those Ruskies.
Man, every single rocket has this kind of action. It says, "What you doing here, boy?" Bam! And then he hits him. It's like, oh, man.
Someone with their car, like stereo playing Sweet Home Alabama, made this piece of equipment that the Ukrainians are lobbing.
Man, it really is something when you think about it.
It really is. Exporting this type of stuff from Alabama, who would have thought it was possible?
Man, who would have thought? They need to include that in the Sweet Home Alabama song remake. But moving on from that, we also get to see a destroyed Buhanka in the area, and honk honk.
Oh my
Also,
goodness.
what
Just
is up
ripping
with
it
the
to shreds.
What is up with the front of this thing? That is not a normal Buhanka.
I think this is armored. It looks like that's like some type of armor on the door, maybe, or some felt, maybe. I'm not sure. It looks armored.
Yeah, it's like an armored up loaf. But it doesn't look like it helped it much.
Oh man, the seat literally got flat and straight out. Somebody's back would have some severe issues if they're sitting there.
Dude, some guy's going, "Oh, this is the back for your lumbar." It's a lumbar support blade. But moving on from that and into the northern area of Ukraine, we also got to see the Ukrainians begin taking down those Russian drones. And here it comes. Oh, they got it.
Oh. Man, it crashed like an airliner or something.
Dude, this guy in the background, he's going, yeah. I'll listen to him.
Oh, блядь, I have to go use the bathroom now.
Is he here? Yeah. It's like,
He's still saying it.
do you need an X-Lax? Yeah. It's like, and there it is. There's the remains of the drone. Oh man, that thing kind of got torn up hitting the ground. I guess at that kind of a speed it would, but that's the end of the clip. Really nice to see that they were able to shoot down a drone, and also the air defense report was impressive last night. 72 of the 132 drones launched last night were completely shot down by small arms fire or any other form of an air defense system, and an additional 59 of them were jammed through electronic warfare means, meaning that only one Shahed out of the 132 fired last night made it through Ukrainian air defense and actually hit its target. So that is actually a very impressive interception rate. That's higher than 99%, somewhere around 99.7% interception rates, which are wildly successful. I mean, that's about as good as it can get. That's literally as good as a THAAD interceptor would do, is around 99.9%. But moving on from that and on into our most interesting location unknowns, we were able to see that the police were back in training, and they aren't training to pull you over. They're training to put you out. Look at them. I mean, they're just around here training, learning, evolving, adapting. They're ready.
It's laughable to call these guys police. They're wearing like straight up like camos. They're carrying an AK. It's like these guys have moved on beyond police. Like, go ahead and label them soldiers at this point.
Man, they show up and they say, "I see that you were speeding." It's like, man, it's like they're not handing out tickets. They're handing out lead in the Ukrainian police these days.
He said, "Bliat, they told us when we signed up for the job, they said we get cross-training, Bliat. You can take this into the civilian world, Bliat, to learn the skills on the job." So they put us in soldier training.
Man, like when someone conducts a robbery on a liquor store, you just got an armored car roll up with a whole bunch of guys looking like they're straight from the army, like running out, suppressive fire, like just like shooting through the windows of the gas station or whatever. But
Man,
anyways,
these are the type of police officers that say they've never given a warning in their life.
man, every time those cops roll up, they always yell, "He's got a gun!" Like it's something like that. But we can see the MiG-29s in flight. Moving on to our next clip, loaded up with an air-to-air loadout, R-73s and R-27s. Pretty neat and really nice. We just love to see that stuff. And also, we got the Russian casualty report, which was also very nice.
Oh my goodness, it looks like it got juicy again all of a sudden. It's a Wagyu steak, it's a T-bone, it's a sirloin. No, it's a lamb chop. But whatever it is, it's looking juicy as hell. But tell us more, Enforcer. I see 4 Bobcats on the list.
Man, 4 Bobcats is a pretty good number. And you said lamb chops. Now almost sent me into my story of the fall of the lamb chop rabbit hole in the United States.
Oh.
We'll save that for the question segment. But beyond that, 60 artillery pieces destroyed, according to Miss DC Keeper of the Records, is tied with 3 others as the 14th highest daily loss. 130 drones shot down ranks as the 4th highest loss, first and third all in January of this year. And also, 194 vehicles is the 2nd highest after 204 lost on the 15th of January of 2025. So, it looks like the numbers are juicy. So let's move on into them and see what the numbers exactly say. 1,600 Russians and Norks were wounded and killed in the past 24 hours, along with 23 APCs, 194 supply trucks, 12 main battle tanks, 60 artillery pieces, 130 drones, 1 anti-aircraft warfare system, and 4 Bobcat skid steers. All in all, they weepin', and we laughin'. We rejoice at these numbers. Moving on from the location unknowns and on up into the area of Vovchansk, we were also able to see the 3rd Brigade infiltrating the lines, and also maybe conducting some questionable activities to do so. So we're going to be muting it because there is music. He says, well, Russians, God is on our side. They laugh because they're not Russians. But moving on from that, surrender, and then we can see them coming out. And well, Russian... They're not Russian. Also, this guy is saying words I cannot repeat. They have contact, and they're saying to someone to speak Russian. They just threw a satchel charge in that one.
So they're delivering ammo to the Russians?
Yes, in a very explosive way.
Well, I'm honestly surprised, really, because I don't understand why the Ukrainians would be like giving the Russians this much ammo and this many explosives like this. It seems like a bit of a conflict of interest. Man, I got to tell you, it's an interesting thing, but they always make sure to give it to them live. You know, it's always an explosive kind of a thing when they deliver it, because the Russians are like, oh, I cannot believe y'all are so kind. You know, it's like they always love it. They really do love it. But I do have to say that their tactics are slightly dubious, claiming that they're Russians. That technically is a war crime. Just want to put that out there. But moving on. I wasn't going to mention that. I was like, I thought that was a war crime to go in like with a ruse saying you're the enemy forces and you're really not, or you're not the enemy forces.
Yeah, that's
so, you know, it is what it is, I guess.
I mean, I guess it is what it is, you know, just a casual violation of the Geneva Convention. But moving on from that, and on down towards Svatove, we did get to see that they were clearing out Russian positions, the 3rd Regiment, speaking of which, not the 3rd Brigade. But here's the clip.
We have rock playing in the background as we walk up to the Russian positions and lob a grenade in like a baseball player. Look at me, we're running in, we're clearing him out, we're tossing another grenade.
That's how Zelenskyy will eventually sound if the war goes on for another 5 years.
My dear Ukrainians, I want to tell you.
Here
His
is
voice
why.
is going to get deeper than Morgan Freeman.
Man, I want that guy on United 24 to become the spokesman for Ukraine. Here is why Ukraine needs more foreign support and the best in the world. You know, or something like that.
They better let him have a break.
Put him on holiday for a little bit. Oh, and there went another grenade right into the Russian dugout, throwing up fire and flames. We get to see them telling them to move on. They're getting on out there.
Someone said Rocky. I wonder if they're talking about Zelenskyy going to sound like Rocky before the war is over. Yo, Adrian, I did it. He might. I don't know. He might say he did it when the war wins and goes in Ukraine's favor. He might say I did it, like Adrian, maybe.
Man, his wife is going to ask, Zelenskyy, why does your voice keep going lower? Can you stop it? He's going to say, hey, look, Adrian, don't ask me to stop being a man. You know, or something like that. Like he's gonna literally turn into Rocky. But moving on from that and further down the line towards Krasny-Rachensky, we also got to see a Ukrainian soldier watching a friendly drone fly past. Check this out. There it goes. A little whining thing.
Sounds better than the two-stroke.
Now we hear the sound of the ocean somehow. And he's drinking hot cocoa. It's coffee. But let's...
This clip gives off vibes of never let them know your next move.
Man, you're about to hear that, and then you're going to hear like some stupid quote. They're going to be like, "Never let the poo poo you, let you poop the poo," or something like that. It's going to be some stupid, like, because that's always how those inspirational things are these days. Like, I don't even think the inspirational quotes have any meaning to them. But anyways, it's time for us to move on down the lines. Time for us to look at something else interesting going on. Have y'all ever seen a Russian riding a horse to war? Well, y'all are about to see it today, because in Miranovka, in the Bakhmut district, a Russian soldier was legitimately riding a horse to the front.
Coming in like Paul Revere. The British are coming.
Man, he feels like a real Russian. He's about to start singing those Russian songs. He's about to be like, Taras, Vitali, Nablini, Kroshi. You know, he's like, about to become a classic Russian, you know, the ones that were still alcoholics. But moving on from that and on towards the front lines near Chasiv Yar, we were able to see them taking out some Russian drones. And probably with the coolest editing I've ever seen so far, they put a blue filter on everything, which was really pleasing visually. But here it is. Rog Raggy, we're taking out his honor.
Rog. Somebody said that Russian was riding Lavrov into battle. That was dirty. That was so dirty.
Oh man.
Oh man.
Listen, I don't know nothing about geopolitics. Y'all know nothing about geopolitics.
That guy went from being given the benefit of the doubt to just pissing me off, honestly.
Yeah, you know, if any of y'all want to go talk to that fella, the Lex guy, and tell him that I'd be interested in talking to him about that, please let him know. If anyone can reach out to him, don't know if he watches this show, because I found those comments to be very narcissistic and arrogant at best, and also very uninformed, considering that his opinion on foreign policy is about as good as an 8th grader's. But moving on from that,
and you know what's worse than that? I was going out of my way, like, honestly,
to give the benefit of the doubt.
To give the guy the benefit of the doubt, because there were some large accounts attacking the hell out of him. I was like, well, look, you know, he's trying to be like, you know, the peacemaker and stuff. He's a little naive to think he can be a peacemaker, considering that nobody can bring Russia and Ukraine to peace right now. But he thinks he can, and he's got like noble intentions at least. And then he went out there with the last video he just put on Twitter and just completely like blew like that defense out of the water with these like super arrogant statements, and also the stuff defending Putin. Basically, it's like, what the hell? It's like, maybe the guy's not naive. He might actually have some different motive. I don't know, because he doesn't make sense.
Oh man, like that was terrible. I actually watched it and I was like, man, to say that kind of stuff and also clearly have no understanding of how this whole foreign policy situation is working, I was like, that is just goofy. Like, and also that was so rude and offensive to literally anyone in the world that may have a disagreement with him, is to go, you don't know what you're talking about, I know what I'm talking about. It's like, no, you don't. It's like, I could easily make 90 arguments as to why you don't. It's like, so what if you do, the Russians just don't want to end the war? It's like, what's the answer? Like, there is no, like,
you know, at first I thought the guy was trying to get the Putin interview. And I was like, okay, he's not saying anything really negative about Putin, because he has to be able to get the interview. And if he says something negative against Putin, then that'll pretty much rule that out. So I was like, okay, I kind of understand why he's sort of like skirting around that issue. But at the same time, though, it's like, you know, he's saying things criticizing Zelenskyy for not wanting to make peace with Russia, and then he said he understood why Zelenskyy felt that way, and then he bashed him for feeling that way. It's like, you know, what do you really believe at this point? It's like, I don't have anything against the guy personally, by the way. I see some people saying, don't start another feud. I'm not trying to, like, you know, personally attack the guy, but his opinions on geopolitics are not really on point, in my opinion.
No, I mean, well, it's not even really an opinion on geopolitics. It's like this fantasy land, you know. Like, I don't have an issue with the guy personally, but I have an issue with what the guy's saying, because to me it sounds like he doesn't know what's going on. So, like, of course, everyone will want to see the war end, but it's like there's certain things that have to happen for the war to end. You just can't wish it away unless you're Neville Chamberlain, and then you're not really wishing it away. You're just giving up. It's like, that's the take, that's the thing. So it's like, how in the world do we work with the cards we're being dealt? Like, in Lex Fridman, like many people, doesn't work with the cards they're dealt with. They like to work with the cards they put in their own hand that aren't even the real ones that you're actually playing with, so that way they can go, I think Putin is a nice man, and I really do think he wants peace. It's like, no, he does not. Under the current conditions, he's made it clear he doesn't. He said that through Peskov, he said that himself. It's like, that's the world we're living in, so why not play on that ball game instead of coming up with an imaginary one and then just lying to yourself and living in a delusion? You know, it's like, there's a difference there with that. But if anyone wants to let him know that we would be interested in chit-chatting with him about that, let him know, because I'd be perfectly fine with going on and asking him, so why do you think that's possible? Well, this is the case, like, so how do you work with that? I'd be very interested in asking those kinds of questions, because I'd really like to know what the answers would be, since he's supposedly the smartest person in foreign policy ever in the world, according to himself. So with that, we're moving on into Tarets, where we were able to see that the Ukrainians were using some drones to great effect on the Russians. By the way, we are going to be launching a coin. We're going to call it Enforcer Coin, and that thing's
Hell
pulling like a
no.
rug.
Hell
I'm just
no.
kidding. I'm just playing. But anyways, also we're going to be muting that. That music is trash. Also, by the way, I want to make sure to let y'all know I'm joking about an Enforcer Coin. We're never making a coin. Period. Like, ever.
Oh. I wish it was a joke. Not for us, but for others.
Oh, it tugged up. That's it, man.
You know that what's not going to the moon is that Russian coin, really. That Russian coin is like rug pull central.
Man, what did they call that thing? A rubble? it's just like,
Yeah, a rubble coin. Wow. Look at that rubble coin.
whoa, look at a tank. Whoa.
I'm surprised Russia hasn't gone to that. Although I will say Russia hasn't made a Russia coin per se, but they're using crypto to avoid sanctions. Like that's been proven for a long time. I think somebody in the Russian government admitted to buying up cryptocurrency so that way they could buy things with it internationally and try to get around the U.S. sanctions. And it actually worked to a large degree. They're getting around it to a pretty good number. I don't have the exact figures in my head right now, but it was pretty decent.
Yeah, it was pretty decent. Also, another thing, let's see. I want to make sure to let y'all know, like, again, we're never making a coin. Because now I'm seeing some people like, hey, that would be a great idea. Hell no. Every single meme coin is a scam. Like I don't care how y'all take that. That's just the truth. Like, every single one of them's a scam. Do not put money into them. Do not touch them. They are scamish. So just do not do that. Like, and also I'm kidding about us ever making a coin, and I'm kidding on it because it's a scam. And I was wanting to laugh at the scamminess of meme coins. Like, that's literally just rug pull 24/7. If anyone makes a meme coin, it's a rug pull. But anyways, we can see them here down in the basement operating these drones.
Also, folks, not political. I'm just saying this just as a general PSA because I hate to see people getting crushed. Do not go invest in those, please. Do not do it because there's no intrinsic value behind it. There's nothing backing it up. Like, for example, a stock. A stock will have a company backing it up. There's some value to it. There's no value to a crypto coin, so don't do it.
Yeah, it's not good. I'm sure many of y'all have seen the Hawk Tua coin, which is the best example that we could give. That was a pure rug pull, like every single one of them are. And now there's others. Don't put money into them, please. I do not want to know that some of y'all were financially ruined because of a very obvious scam. So please do not put money into those.
Someone said there's no value in gold. No. The gold is the value, and they set a value on the gold.
And then that's what gives gold its value. It's like,
Yeah.
kind of, yeah. But anyways, we can see the Ukrainians here. They are doing some hard work on those drones. I mean, like, really. They're just locked in. And Tom
Let's see
said,
here. You're taking my life. Said, can you explain how these meme coins go up in value so quick, or how they have any retail, or how they have any value at all? So here is my understanding of it, real quick. I'm not trying to get super off topic while we're watching this footage here, but apparently, when people start buying the meme coin, that the value being generated there is other people's money. So I don't want to say it's like necessarily a pyramid scheme. Although I guess you could kind of say it could maybe qualify as one. But other people's money is what's creating that market cap. So when people make a profit off of that meme coin, they're basically taking other people's money to make that profit. So somebody is losing big while somebody is winning. And a lot of the times, these meme coins will be primarily owned by the owners themselves, and they'll basically what's called rug pull it, which is basically sell out from under the actual buyers of the coin and make a humongous profit and screw over all the buyers of the coin. So there's really just no value to it. Like, it's really honestly, like, I feel like maybe 5 to 10 years down the road, this will be so regulated that there's probably not even permitted, but it's just not good.
Yeah, that's a pretty good explanation of it. And also the fact that usually in the wallets of these coins, usually the person who created the coin owns 90% of it, so only 10% of the actual coins are being traded, which also heavily inflates the value. And then once that person sells the 90% of the wallet that they're holding, the price drops rapidly. That's why it's a rug pull. They make all of the money, and pretty much everyone who ever put anything into it loses mostly everything. That's kind of how it works. But anyways, moving on from that, we got to see the whole Ukrainian shotgun drone back at it. It's got a shotgun under it. Check this out. Kaboom. And it just took one down. Like that. And here comes the second one. They're just blasting these. Like, this is crazy, man. They literally just mounted, I think it was like a 16 gauge shotgun, two of them to the bottom of this thing. They just go out there and wipe drones out now with them. It's kind of cool. But moving on from that.
Cool.
And into our next clip, we also got to see some folks hanging out at the Pokrovsk Oblast signed, the Pokrovsky Rayon, which means Pokrovsk Oblast. And you see them holding up a flag right here. Really cool, really neat. We love to see it. And moving on from that and on into our next clip, down near Kurakove, we got to see Ukrainian Grad firing its rockets. Look at it. Just so impressive, so demure, so brat. We love to see it, and we love to see the artillerists with their protractors and pages of information to be able to get these things lined up and firing properly. Moving on from that, down near Volnovakha, a Russian command post also got knocked out today as well. There's the explosion. And these Russians are like, oh my god! Oh my god! And there was a second one. Call that thing a double tap, the way we hit it twice. Damn. But moving on from that.
Calling a drone strike. Give him the beans. Sending the Reaper. You know what I mean?
Man, I'm telling you. But moving on from that, we also get to see them hitting some more Russians in the south. Check this out. They got the old-fashioned video with a kid getting on a stool for no reason. But they're dropping bomblets on the Russians. Holy moly. The work is insane. There they go. And then they're going to put together the montage of them exploding here in a second. This unit is called Cursed Empire, by the way. Don't know why. Have no clue, but check this out. After we get done watching all of these bomblets being dropped, here comes the explosions, finally. Just dead-on hits. I mean, they're slamming them. Also, JS, I don't think that's what a rug pull is at all. Like, I don't know where you got that from, but whoever told you that, you need to ask them what's going through their mind and are they okay? Because that is not a rug pull. Like, that is not a rug pull at all. But moving on.
I just saw what he said. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah,
oh my god, that's really crazy.
Yeah, I think there was a typo there, by the way. It was supposed to be wrapped, but it turned into something else. I could tell because, you know, that's just you know, but that is not what a rug pull is. But anyways, moving on from that, we got to see flaming dragons making their way into the Russian trenches. These are drones that are on fire before they hit, and they burn once they hit the trench. And look at them go. They are just absolutely causing havoc on these Russians. Oh!
Oh, man. What with ya boys? Damn, son, where'd you find this?
Man, I'm telling you what. Look at him go. Ole mole. Man, it's crazy. It really is.
That is crazy. Look at that. Look at that.
Oh, and right in the front of the Buhanka. Oh, the second one went right inside, cooking her up Gary's way. But we can see them slamming the front hood of the Russian car and also taking out a drone at the end. Chef's kisses right here. Look at this. Another one. Oh. And the Ukrainian SBU symbol shows up. Holy moly, it's the owl. Who? The Russians is who. But moving on from that and on down into Crimea, we also got to hear that the entirety of Crimea has been blockaded. That's according to the Ukrainian statement by the Ukrainian Navy spokesperson, Dmytro Pletenchuk. And he said, large enemy ships have long left Crimea. Ports mainly host small vessels like Grachanok or Raptor, tasked with anti-sabotage defense. But for the large part, the Russian maritime fleet, so grand and pompous at the beginning of the war, is completely absent from the shores of Crimea. The Ukrainians have somehow inflicted a blockade on the peninsula without a navy. It's always an impressive thing to remind us all about, and it once again reminds us that Ukrainian naval operations are truly the best in the world. But with that, it is time for us to move on from that big news in Crimea. But still, before we do, Matthew is desperately texting me on my phone going, Paul, he's like, Ukraine says Russia no longer transfers anything to Crimea via sea. And why is Ukraine not destroying the Kerch Bridge yet? I mean, that thing's a target. It's the only corridor in the Crimea at this point beyond the land bridge. Why not smack the shit out of that thing and send the Russians back where they came from? You know what I mean? But still, a lot of people are saying that Ukraine is just waiting for the right time. Budinov said that they were going to hit it at the beginning of last year. It's only a year later. I mean, they still got time to go. Others are saying that the Russians have fortified just too much. Possible for them to hit it. I mean, you'd have to sit there. You'd have to get a tire. Well, you actually have to get an X-wing right into the trench and fly it about a couple of 100 miles to hit a 6-foot wide diameter hole with a torpedo. Just impossible. You just can't do it unless someone was conducting an absolute miracle of the force or something like that. And then other people said they're unsure and undecided, and other people are saying it's not really important. I mean, this is just the only corridor that support and supplies get into Crimea at this point, but it's not that important. Anyways, beyond that, Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so why is Ukraine not destroying the Kerch Bridge? It looks like 54% said Ukraine's just waiting for the right time, while 23% said Russia's fortified the bridge too much, and 11% said it's really not that important. And I would say the Kerch Bridge is certainly extremely important now, because they've literally just said that Russia cannot get anything into Crimea because they're too worried about the sea babies coming in and smashing their ships. So that leaves the Kerch Bridge as one of the only ways into Crimea for the Russian forces, so that makes it extremely important. So why is Ukraine not hitting it? They said they were going to hit it in 2024, and they did not. And honestly, I think the answer is that if Ukraine could hit it, they would certainly take it out literally right this second. It would be a big propaganda win and also a big strategic win, but they're not doing it because I think Russia has fortified the bridge so much that they simply cannot strike it good enough to destroy it. So I think the Russians beat them to the punch on this one, and Budinov kind of blew the lid on it, and it's kind of a little bit too late unless the Ukrainians do an on-the-ground operation to take it out. So I'm with the 23%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that I'm with the 23%. I think the Russians have simply fortified it too much. Budinov last year came out, pushed his head back a little bit to make that double chin and then said, oh, we're going to hit it in like a month. And the Russians freaked out because even then it was really the only way to get into Crimea beyond the land bridge. So they actually defended the hell out of this thing. I would say that at this point, according to what we know, this is really the only thing in the entirety of the war that actually is properly defended at this point. Nothing else is. Literally everything else can be a target but the bridge, because they defended it so heavily after those statements were made at the beginning of last year. So to be entirely honest with y'all, I just think they've lost the opportune time to be able to hit the bridge. They gave the Russians too many tip-offs to say they were going to do it, and the Russians freaked out, and in the first time ever that I've seen the war, it looks like they actually properly defended something for once. So I'm thinking that it wouldn't really be possible moving on into the future. Also, one thing I was interested in, just kind of sort of, are these lakes. What the hell are these, and why do they look like that? Let's see. Are they dry lakes? They are, for the most part.
It's like Salt Lake City, but it's not.
It's like Salt Lake City, but they don't have a big city around it. They only have Old Honky. And it looks like actually they have Old Honky, not Old Honky. And also they have a dancing village nearby as well. It has a 4.5 star. I wonder why. But beyond that,
the Ukrainians made them dance a lot when they sent in those attackums and stuff last time.
Man, they said, damn! And then they blew up all those railroad ferry barges that crossed the strait. But anyways, moving on from that and out of the area of Crimea, it's now time for us to get on up into Kyiv and cover the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. I don't know why I'm stuttering so badly tonight. I was so sorry about that. But from yesterday, because he had one today that was like an hour long and we couldn't use it. So here's the one from yesterday, and it's so short, it's almost unusable. It's only 2 minutes long. So without further ado, here's the speech. Peach!
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці, українки. Сьогодні теж є хороша робота Служби безпеки України, ДБР, Національної поліції, прокуратури щодо справедливості в Україні. Зокрема, у військових справах і грошовиті воєнкоми, і ситуації, як на Харківщині, коли російська армія намагалась окупувати нашу землю і знову вийти на Харків, і злочинні помилки в керівництві бригад. Ми все це потребує розслідування і справедливих відповідей. Я дякую правоохоронцям за сьогоднішні кроки. Важливо, щоб люди відчували, що статус чи будь-які вчорашні заслуги не скасовують верховенство права. Провів сьогодні ставку, багато питань щодо нашого внутрішнього виробництва і щодо ремонту техніки, наш ОПК, наше оборонне виробництво – це безумовний пріоритет. Сьогодні в Україні був спікер Сейму Литви. Ми говорили про подальшу співпрацю між нашими державами, між нашими народами. І я вдячний за підтримку усім литовцям, всім нашим друзям. Хочу подякувати Гітанасу, президенту Литви. І впевнений, зараз саме така єдність, як між нашими країнами, між Україною і Литвою, потрібна всій нашій Європі, щоб ми змогли досягти безпеки для себе, для всіх в Європі. І зараз для цього є хороший шанс. Інаугурація нового президента Сполучених Штатів Дональда Трампа. Він сильна людина. Я бажаю успіху президенту Трампу, всій Америці. Українці готові працювати разом з американцями, щоб досягти миру, справжнього миру. Це шанс. Шанс, яким потрібно скористатись. Слава Україні!
And Slava. And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, and that's moving us on into the second segment of this stream, where we get to talk to each and every one of y'all. And boy, howdy, what a fun segment this always is. It's always one of the funnest segments that I can imagine, personally, to be entirely honest with y'all. Because we can talk about literally anything and everything in the segment. We can talk about anything that y'all want to talk about. We can talk about things y'all don't want to talk about. But as long as it's not politics or religion. Those are, of course, two things that we do not talk about on this channel. But we can talk about literally anything and everything else. And it always is the funnest segment for that reason. Also, let's see here. Hang on. I want to say, let's see. Storm Shadow missiles would be able to hit the bridge without detection. That is true, actually. That is true. But you know what? That's a good point that we need to get on into these questions to be able to know what everyone is saying and thinking. So, Matthew, please, by all means, tell us, what kind of questions do folks have?
All right, so you might have noticed that we have no polls left to address, even though the polls are still very happy over there in Poland. We do not have any left to address. They're alive and well, and they're also arming themselves to the teeth. But anyways, we are now moving on here to our Super Chat segment as we look at a picture here of Warsaw as we move on to this question. Our first one here goes to... Look at those polls. I thought you were talking about the two right there on the side of the building, but yes, I do see some polls here.
Yeah, I mean, we could have had all of these on our show tonight, but we only had like 5 of them, I think.
Only 5?
Yeah, you know, we had 5 polls, you know, like you put up 5 polls.
Oh,
there's
okay,
there's like about 1 million of them in Warsaw, Matthew. Like, come on, Matthew, like start getting creative here. We got to get all of them on the show. Come on, man. Like, it's just like...
Do you remember that Volkswagen, since you mentioned Warsaw, there was that Volkswagen that could make it from like...
Berlin to Warsaw in one tank?
Berlin to Warsaw in one tank. Volkswagen wasn't the first one to do that, by the way. Actually, back in the day, there was a country that did that too.
You know, back in the day, there was this thing called Krasmafie-Wagman, and they made all these cool tanks, like literal tanks, that made it to Poland. Like, a really weird thing, totally different time in history. And I don't really think it was for tourism reasons back then, but still kind of wild to think that Volkswagen really wasn't the first. But anyways, let's see. With that, I think we do have loads of questions. I interrupted you too much there. Sorry about that, but go ahead, Matthew.
So this one here goes to Captain Ted, our first Super Chat of the last segment, and Captain Ted put in a very generous $50 donation as I get very choked up about it. Thank you very much, Captain Ted, for touching me in the feels. He said, just because, an LSA.
Hey! Thank you so much for the massive support, Captain Ted. And thank you for helping this channel to keep on running, and thank you for throwing in a massive piece of support just because. Just cause. Operation Just Cause, when the United States invaded Panama back in the 70s. Yippee! But beyond that, I'm just kidding. But beyond that, I do thank you so much for the massive support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it was not for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible. We wouldn't be able to be here right now. We say that a lot, and I know a lot of people are used to hearing it, and it sounds like a broken record kind of a thing. But if it truly wasn't for the folks who went out of their way to support a channel that no one has to support, we wouldn't have been able to be here for all of this time. We have been here for 1,063 days. And crazily enough, that is chalking up to nearly be exactly 3 years. Let me go make sure on that. Let's see. 1,063 divided by 365. So yeah, that's about exactly 3 years at this point that we have been on this channel covering the news. And it's really crazy to think that we've been around for that long and that we've been able to tell all of y'all the news and, of course, accompany y'all with all the historical events and occurrences that happen in our daily lives each and every one of those days. There really hasn't been a day that we've missed covering the news with y'all, and it really is an honor and in a high thing of pride that Matthew and me have in being able to be in this position and be able to do this for 1,063 days. And if it wasn't for folks like you that went out of their way, Captain Ted, to support this channel, we wouldn't have been able to make this thing possible. And of course, if you can support, that is amazing. Y'all don't even have to support. But all the folks who are just here with us each and every day, even the 7,200 of y'all who are here right now, whether y'all support or not, y'all all make this possible. The folks who throw in super chats help us to be able to pay our bills, but all the folks in the thousands that are here at any given moment are all of the folks that give us the inspiration to keep this thing running. Of course, paying the bills is one part, but really having the drive and the inspiration to do it is another. And the massive groups, the swarms of people who come to the stream every night to hear the news nightly are really what gives us a lot of inspiration to also make this possible. I got to give a huge thanks to each and every one of y'all for having been here with us for so long, so that way Captain Ted could throw in a $50 super chat just because, but it has a lot more behind it than just doing it. And so with that, thank you so much once again. Long live the Lee Spring Army, and the Lee Spring Army will never die. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, real quick, Enforcer, I just wanted to mention this. I just saw on Twitter that apparently there's a new AI tool that's called GeoSpy that can actually geolocate photos by analyzing the features in the image, no matter how small. And it looks like I saw a demo of it here on Twitter. It's insane, by the way. Like, this is going to take away the job of some geospatial analysts, actually. This thing can find pretty much anything. Like, I'll have to show it to you after the stream. It's quite crazy to see. But also, there was another piece of news here that apparently the U.S., apparently either yesterday or today, delivered at least one 747 load of supplies to Ukraine. And it looks like that was sponsored by the new admin. So, pretty good. Looks like we're still sending aid, and actual physical aid is still arriving there, even to this day.
Oh, that's nice to hear. But I do have to say this, Matthew. Isn't the guy who's kind of pushing forward this whole AI geolocating thing on a picture and a couple of landmarks, wasn't he the same guy that also banned someone because he was publishing public transponder information about where private jets were and where they were heading and everything? Like,
No, it's not that guy.
Well, but it's on Twitter?
Yeah, the post is on Twitter, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you meant it was like a Twitter included kind of a system. I was like, isn't that violating a lot of people's privacy? Like, you take one picture and they know exactly where you are from that picture because the AI can figure it out through through landmark navigation and finding and everything. It's like, I don't know about that one, man. Like, because it's like, with how we do it, it takes a certain level of skill, and also, you don't just, it's not just easy for any random Joe Blow, like say a stalker, to geolocate exactly where you are. But with that tool, it'll be pretty easy for quite literally anyone with any reasons to geolocate anything. It's like, I don't know about that one.
Yeah, pretty much, I think, at this point. And also, it's going to take the job away from some analysts, too. So, for us, it'll be pretty neat because we'll be able to geolocate things a hell of a lot faster. But yeah, it has some implications of privacy that are a little bit concerning.
Yeah, that's a little concerning, just a little. Well, but still, interesting news to hear that we did provide Ukraine with support yesterday or today, showing that the United States of America is still supporting Ukraine as much as it can. And so with that, I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, it is time for us to move on. Also, really quickly, I saw someone say, did y'all get snow? Hot Dog Man actually asked it, funnily enough. Did y'all get snow in Alabama? Not where, sorry if y'all heard that, so sorry, but not where we are. Like, we did not get snow. We are in the Birmingham city area, and crazily enough, it was everything south of us that got snow. I think the snow starts somewhere around Clanton and goes all the way down to literally the Gulf Coast. It's the first time in history that there has been a blizzard warning on the Gulf Coast of the Gulf of Mexico, which is a little wild to hear. It's actually crazy because it actually is, interestingly enough, one of the weather elements that is supposed to happen when global warming, well, not really global warming, but really climate change starts to get a little bit more serious. So that's a little interesting because generally here in the South, we're not, the states in the South really aren't supposed to survive extreme weather like that. It has happened in the past. It's gotten way colder than it is currently in the south, but it's a little bit interesting to see that there are blizzards that are now happening down here. To explain that really quickly, why that is even happening, in why that is climate change, or if you want to say it's climate change, it's fairly interesting because in the North Pole, which is generally the area where the most melting occurs, there is a cold air current that usually exists there year round, and it's a specific size because of the thermal energy that's being exuded by melting ice caps in that area year round. But as the ice caps have started to melt a little bit more significantly recently, and some of those ice sheets really aren't reforming, it appears that at the moment, well, it's not really appears, it actually is happening, that this cold air is a lot more dense than the warmer air that surrounds the equator. And because of that, it actually starts to spread outwards further from the North Pole and more towards the south. And as this does this, it starts to create more severe weather elements, more severe hurricanes, more severe tornadoes, but specifically in this specific scenario, extreme winter storms that are reaching far more south than their normal range. Usually blizzards like this are really normal for the northern areas of the United States and also Canada, but for them to be able to reach down to the Gulf Coast, this is starting to become a bit of a serious concern, because this has actually never happened in history. Some people have said, well, it's gotten colder. Yes, it has, but there's never been a blizzard that has reached the Gulf Coast in recorded history. So it's a little bit of an interesting thing there, and it's a fairly concerning occurrence, because it is starting to show that some of the impacts of climate change are starting to actually coalesce themselves in a bit more of an extreme way, such as these weather elements. And some people are like, well, it's a blizzard. What the hell? What does that matter? Animals down here are not acclimated to surviving blizzards. They're just not. So it can start to devastate local wildlife populations, which by a couple of years' time from now, that could start to affect population growth patterns. And then you could see some forms of parasites start to affect crop production in the south, which is a fairly big thing. And you could also see that it starts to affect other forms of life as well within the area, which could start to have an effect on the economy. So that's kind of a bit of the concern there, is that this could start to affect the U.S. economically down the line. But beyond that, I hope that does address that well. Also, I see some people saying that it's the it's the Gulf of America. Listen, folks, I grew up with it being called the Gulf of Mexico. I'm not changing that anytime soon. Like, it's named the Gulf of Mexico because the Gulf of Mexico was named by, I believe, the Spanish, while Mexico was still New Spain, and Mexico was just a province of New Spain. So I'm not like the naming convention there isn't supposed to be like Mexico flexing on America. It's just what it was named. I'm gonna keep calling it the Gulf of Mexico. Like it's kind of like how
that's the Gulf of your mama. Your mama's so big the Gulf got named after her.
Man, it's kind of like how one U.S. administration came through and they're like, Fort Benning can't be Fort Benning anymore. It's now Fort Freedom, or whatever the hell they called it. I still call it Fort Benning, because I'm just not like if I grew up calling something like Fort Benning, or for example the Gulf of Mexico, I'm not changing that. Like, it's like I don't care, like because the whole fort renaming thing happened under a different administration with a different political leaning. I didn't care. I was like, I grew up calling that Fort Benning. That's still Fort Benning. I grew up calling the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of Mexico. It's still going to be the Gulf of Mexico to me, because it's always been the Gulf of Mexico for hundreds of years, quite honestly. So anyways, with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. So, if you're expecting me to be changing anything, like start calling Cape Canaveral, I forgot what they renamed Cape Canaveral. It's renamed something else now. Like the actual launching areas. But I'm still going to call it Cape Canaveral. I'm still going to call Fort Benning Fort Benning. I'm still going to call the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of Mexico. But anyways, with that, it's time for us to move on to the next one. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so jumping into our next super chat here. This one goes to Chargy, who puts in a $33 donation, and thank you very much, Chargy, for that support. And I gotta say, Chargy usually throws in the super chats and talks about getting the double burgers at In-N-Out, and sadly, I've not had the chance to get it yet.
Dang it.
But I still want to get it. But thank you very much, Chargy, for that support. They said, hey, guys, and thanks for all you do. And T1FT chat, take one from the chat, NLLT LSA.
And I got to thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. I got to thank you for the kind words as well. Your support is helping to make this channel possible and helping us to keep this thing running day in and day out. And I got to thank you massively for that, because if it was not for folks like you, Shargy, we would not be able to make this thing possible. And hopefully one day we'll be able to have those delicious In-N-Out burgers. Maybe we'll be by LA sometime in the future. Hopefully the fires will be out by then. And still, thank you so much once again for support. And we will make sure to take one from the chat and LSA all the way. And so with that, what do we got from the live chat, Matthew?
All right, so the In-N-Out double with fries is going to go to, let's see here. Let's see who this one's going to go to. This one goes to Boo Googly, who says, what do you think about the U.S. plan to plant a flag on Mars?
I think it's great. Of course, it's a national prestige pursuit. I think national prestige pursuits are great because while, of course, a lot of our progress and a lot of our governmental focus should be on progress that is truly feelable by the citizens in a change in their life, I still think that those kinds of prestige pursuits are a big thing for the nation and a big thing to remind people that the United States is truly above and beyond really all else, really other countries around the world and other spheres in the world, because we were able to do things that they are not able to. And by planting a flag on Mars, I think it's really showing that we not only have been really the conquerors of space in a sense by planting flags on the moon and having multiple manned expeditions to the moon, but we're also going to be able to have manned expeditions to Mars as well, which is a far larger kind of an achievement than landing on the moon ever was. Making it to Mars would take about, I think it's 2 months. Making it to the moon only takes about 3 days. So if we can do that, that'll be absolutely incredible. But anyways, actually, I think making it to Mars takes about 2 years, if I'm correct. It's actually way farther than 3 days. But still, I think that would be absolutely amazing. But beyond that, let's see here. I want to see some people saying some stuff. Also, I see some people, interestingly enough, some guy got pissed off. I'm seeing him in the chat. He said, woke. No, I just call things what they are. Like, I don't really get the point of, like, I'm just going to be honest. I don't get the point of renaming the Gulf of Mexico. That makes no sense. The Gulf of Mexico has been named the Gulf of Mexico since 1672, before the United States even existed. That's why it's called the Gulf of Mexico. Like, we don't call this continent that we live on the continent of North Washington because George Washington was the first president of the United States, and America is just that good and great that it needs to be renamed from Amerigo Vespucci to Washington, George Washington. Like, those kinds of things just seem kind of goofy to me. It's called the Gulf of Mexico because Mexico was there before the United States or anyone else in the area even existed as a part of New Spain. That's just what it's been called. It's literally been called that before American history. So I don't really get the point of trying to rename it. It just makes no sense. It's like trying to rename the continent of North America or anything else for that matter. I don't get it. Like, I know it is the Gulf of Mexico. I've grown up. I'm 23 years old nearly now. I'm going to keep calling it the Gulf of Mexico because I've called it that my entire life. I'm going to keep calling Fort Benning because my entire life it was Fort Benning. It has nothing to do with politics. It has to do with the fact I'm not, like, I hate to say this, I'm not really a political minded idiot, so I don't like to just rename things because of agenda purposes. If it's the Gulf of Mexico and it's been that way for hundreds of years, why the hell are we going to break with tradition and start renaming it to the Gulf of America? It just doesn't make much sense at all. You know, it's and on top of that, I'm from here. I don't know where you're from, the person who is, and someone said because you're taking it too seriously. I'm not taking it too seriously. Why the hell is someone taking it so seriously they're going to rename the Gulf to the Gulf of, like, why in the world are they taking the naming convention that seriously that Mexico is getting one over on us, so we have to rename the whole Gulf to the Gulf of America? That seems a little goofy to me. Like, to take a naming convention like that so seriously. I don't take names seriously. I take them at face value for what they are. But I do have to say this: Wild Alaska Effect said Denali is Denali, not McKinley. I'm not gonna lie. When I was a kid, I think it was still called McKinley, and I still call that mountain Mount McKinley. Like as far as I've always known, up until recently, I think it was like 2009 or something like that. It was renamed Denali, but that's Mount McKinley to me. because that's the only, like, it was called Denali by the local peoples for, I think, hundreds if not thousands of years, Denali, but as far as I knew, it was called Mount McKinley. So when I saw the mountain, I was like, oh, Mount McKinley. And then someone told me it was Denali. And I said, what the hell is Denali? And then they said, well, that's what they now rename Mount McKinley. So I just still call it Mount McKinley. Like that's how I work with names. The first thing I hear is what I'm going with. Trying to change it, pointless. Like, that's just pointless to me. But also, someone said, yeah, it's goofy. That's why it's a big joke. Well, it's not a big joke if you're going to illegally make that what the United States is going to call the Gulf of Mexico. Like, it's already showing up in the documents of the state of Florida that they said there were severe weather inclements over the Gulf of America. It's not really a joke. It's something that's actually happening, and I don't really understand.
I don't really understand like the purpose behind it really, because I guess for like shits and giggles, I guess it's funny to like rename it the Gulf of America, but the name of the Gulf really makes no difference whatsoever. It's not solving anything like on a realistic, pragmatic view of things. And rather than pissing off Mexico, just sort of like jabbing at them or something, then I don't understand why we did that. So it's just like, why? It's like there's other things you could have chosen to fight over. Why choose a fight over a name?
I just don't get it. Like, at all. Let's see. Someone said 23. Wow, so old. Oh, look, man, like, I haven't been around the block, sure, but if I've grown up my entire life, even if it's just 22 years, and I'm not some angry person like you who may be 50 or so, I'm going to call it the Gulf of Mexico. I've called it that my entire life. Why in the world am I going to change that now? And why in the world?
Although also Enforcer, by the way, like how did get the name, like not the whole history lesson, but how did get the name Gulf of Mexico? How did they get to name it that?
Well, back in the day, when Spain controlled Mexico and it was called New Spain, they had a province in New Spain called Mexico. And so the original name was actually in Spanish, not in English at all, because the English hardly were setting up colonies just, north of Virginia at this point. So it really had nothing to do with the area down here. But they called it in Spanish the Golfo de Mexico, or Mexique, which was actually what it was originally called in 1672, because the first time anyone actually conducted a full cartography of the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean, that was the original name, because the closest thing to it was the Spanish province of Mexico in New Spain. So they just went, well, it'd make the most sense to call it the Gulf of Mexico, because the Mexican province of New Spain is right there, and that's what it is. I mean, hell, there wasn't, like, also another thing that I have to remind you all of is that at the time, Spain also controlled Florida. So pretty much the entirety of the Gulf was controlled by Spain in some extent. I mean, hell, they even had a fort in Mobile, Alabama, and they also had forts along the coast near to the Biloxi area. So quite literally, actually also at the time, Texas was a part of New Spain as well. So quite literally, the entire Gulf was controlled by Spain, and so then they were like, well, let's just call it the Gulf of Mexico, because the biggest shoreline in the Gulf is on the Mexican province of New Spain, so we'll just call it the Gulf of Mexico. That's how I got the name.
Interesting. So that makes a lot more sense, I guess. That makes a lot more sense. So yeah, I don't know why not leave it the name Gulf of Mexico is. Why not rename, like, for example, like, why not rename the Atlantic Oceans like the Ocean of America or something like that? It's like at what point do you stop renaming stuff?
Like to me, it's goofy. It's like, oh, like, all these forts, that have names of people who may have been morally dubious, we're going to rename them. So Fort Benning, I think, got renamed to Fort Liberty. I'm not calling it Fort Liberty. It's like, that's Fort Benning. It's like, I grew up with it being called.
I mean, I know like all the military people will not call it Fort Liberty either, unless they're like in an official role or something. They're having to say it because their superiors are nearby. Everybody still calls it Fort Benning. Literally everybody.
Yeah, and also it's like at that point, it's like these things are being renamed for some political agenda in one way or another, because the fort renaming thing happened under a completely different political party for a completely different reason. And I said, that sounds stupid, I'm just going to call it Fort Benning. And now this idea of renaming the Gulf of Mexico is coming from a new political party with a different political ambition, and I just say that's stupid, I'm going to call it the Gulf of Mexico. Like, I'm just going to be completely politically fair there, renaming things that have always been called something for as long as people have been alive, longer than that, hundreds of years or decades. It's stupid to rename them. So just call them for what they are. That's honestly like my take. And now someone's going to get below. It's called power hungry. Okay, so how about that prior administration that renamed like all of the U.S. forts? Were they power hungry? No, they weren't. I would say neither one is. I would say it's just the stupid ambition of trying to make a It's not really a stupid ambition, but it really is stupid when you do it in this way of trying to make a legacy or something like that, so that way you can go, I did that, I renamed it. And it's like, why? Like, it's like no one's going to call it that. Like, if I called the Gulf of America, like the Gulf of America, that would be pretty goofy. I just did right there. But if I call the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America, that's pretty goofy. That's like saying, that's about as goofy, in my opinion, as calling Ukraine Novorussia. It's like, because that's what the Russians call Ukraine, is New Russia in Russian. It's like, are we going to start calling Ukraine New Russian, or New Russia, just because they said that that's what it should be called? No. It's like, that would be stupid. It's called Ukraine. It's always been called Ukraine. Like, hell, even back in the day, people knew what Ukraine was, well before it even became a part of the Russian Empire. It's like, that would be dumb to rename the area into something different. It's kind of like, in another instance, it's kind of like how Burma, like, and you can even see this on Google, Burma renamed itself Myanmar. Why? I don't know. But beyond that, Google even knows that nobody even knows what the hell Myanmar is, so they put in parentheses below it Burma, because that's what everyone knows it as. They know it as Burma. So that's like whenever I go and look at Myanmar, I'm having to struggle to remember that that's its new name. So I always just revert back to Burma, because it doesn't make any sense to rename something. It's called Burma. It's Burma. It is what it is. That's just my take. And so now some people are getting butthurt. It is what it is. But no, I just find, I will be honest, I will die on a hill on that one. Those name changing things is goofy.
I honestly really don't care, honestly. Like, if they call it the Gulf of America, Gulf of Mexico, whatever the hell they want to call it, it really doesn't make a difference. Now, if I focus on it, I'll be like, okay, that was pretty, petty to rename it the Gulf of America just to take a jab at Mexico. But, at the same time, who really cares what the hell it's called? It's like, it's still a body of water. We sail ships through it, and that's the end of it. It's like, it really doesn't matter, honestly.
Yeah. Also, by the way, I just want to make it fairly clear. This is not making a political comment. I feel like I'm being fair here, because I'm also talking about a prior administration under a different political party that renamed all the military bases. I just kind of find that sort of thing stupid across the board, no matter who's doing it. So, I'm sorry if you are drinking political Kool-Aid and you hate it because I'm saying that your guy did it and I don't like that because I just don't like it across the board. Sorry, but I'm not changing on that. That's just what it is. If you say we're renaming Texas to South Oklahoma, I go, that's stupid. I'm not calling it South Oklahoma. I'm calling it Texas. That's what it is. So with that, I hope that does address that well, at least in my opinion. I just hope that y'all can take this away from it. At the end of the day, I don't work off of goofy La La Land business. I just work off of common sense. And if something is called something, I'm just going to keep calling it that until the end of time. I don't care if anyone's trying to change the name or what. That's what it's going to be called. Anyways, with that, it is time for us to move on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat actually just came in from PayPal. It's from T. Abiri LSA, who put in a $100 donation.
What?
And thank you very much, T. Abiri, for that support. And by the way, they already had the PayPal address from way back in the day, so that's why they put it through PayPal. But thank you very much, T. Abiri, for that support. And they said almost 3 years, and thank you both for your effort. And greetings from Switzerland, T. Abiri LSA. And once again, huge thanks for that support, and shout out to Switzerland.
And I got to thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And that is absolutely crazy that you threw in that kind of support. I got to thank you massively. Also, Matthew, did he send it to your PayPal or mine?
I sent it to the business PayPal.
So that would be the one under the email that the channel was originally registered under, right?
No, but I can't say it live on there. We don't want to get into an OPSEC thing.
So you're seeing it, but it wouldn't be on mine, right? Like, I'm just making sure.
No, it wouldn't be on yours.
Okay, so I was just want to make sure because I was trying to pull it up so that way I could actually read the message. But I still have to thank you massively, Tang and Abiri, for the major support in helping this channel to keep on running. And I got to thank you for the kind words as well. And a big hello to Switzerland, a nice little country in the middle of Europe, a real neutral country. And they have really cool names like Bern and Belp and Bergdorf and Grenchen. That's where the Grinch comes from, by the way. Grenchen, right here. They have a McDonald's here. It's not that bad of a place.
Grinch. It's a 3.5-star rating. It's a Grinch.
Man, you go in there. Could I have a hamburger? Piss off. It's like, oh no, it's the Grinch. Let's see.
Two costumers. What was it, Halloween?
I don't know. let's see. Dang, man, like, apparently, oh my lord, like, also anime picture for no reason, don't know why. But apparently a lot of people don't have good things to say about the McDonald's in Grenchen. But still, I got to thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it was not for folks like you, we would not be able to make this thing possible, Tangadabiri, and I got to thank you so much once again for the support and helping this thing to be possible, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this thing running. And so a massive thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And I must admit, it is nice to get around them juicy fees here on YouTube. It is quite good. But anyways, thank you once again to Yabiri for that support. But with that, we are now moving on to our next super chat here. And this one is going to go to Gunfox, who's not 61 anymore. He's just Gunfox. And he put in two $20 donations and the days in history once again. And thank you very much, Gunfox, for the double support, the $40 donation. He said, on June the 3rd, 1965, Gemini 4, Ed White became the first American to make a extravehicular activity, an EVA or spacewalk. On the 8th of August 1989, the STS-28 shuttle Columbia launch LC-39B landed Edwards, fourth classified DoD mission. Also, take a question from the chat. Continuing on here, it says January the 21st, 1976, two scheduled routes, London to Bahrain, and Paris, Rio. The Concorde begins ferrying commercial customers at 1,350 miles per hour, and in 1793, Francis deposed King Louis the XVI. We'll leave it at that. Guillotine, and also 1950, suspected Soviet spy convicted.
And thank you so much for the day in a history, but one thing I heard, because I know you're a space person, is the lunar roving vehicle, and what a cool vehicle it was. It was such a cool vehicle, such a neat vehicle, a long-lasting vehicle. Look at that thing. Just a true peak of engineering. Honestly, the thing
Real simple looking, really, honestly.
Yeah, they had to make it lightweight so that way they could carry it along with them. But it is really cool, actually. Like, when you think about it, it's a little rover. You could drive it around. And they called it the Dune Buggy. Like a Dune Buggy. Get it? It's like a Dune Buggy, but for the moon. And also, I think if I remember correctly, this thing is built on the chassis of, like, a Willys or something like that. Let me go see. Where in the world? At least that's what I've heard before. I could be wrong, and I think I am wrong on that.
It's made by GM, I believe, but it's not based on the Willys.
Dagnabbit, I've been lied to. Whoever told that to me deceived me, and I forgot who told that to me. But still, there it is next to the lunar lander module. That thing is really cool, actually, and it's really neat to know that they just drove these things around. Look at them go. They're having fun.
Look at that, in Hollywood studios.
Yeah, in Hollywood studios. Yeah.
I'm joking, people. I'm joking, by the way.
Look, you see that dark black background? There's no stars. This is obviously a Hollywood backdrop. Not even thinking that the light reflecting off of the surface of the moon from the sun is creating the same effect that you would see on Earth, where in the middle of broad daylight you can't see the stars. Who would have thunk? But beyond that, still pretty cool thing. Love the lunar lander. Really neat. And also the lunar lander rover. I think it's just incredibly cool and kind of cute. Look at him driving that thing around. A little funny fella. He's just sitting there.
Look at him, man. Filming on a red camera. Excuse me. It was filmed on the moon camera.
He was filming in he was filming in Lake of Tranquility. Yeah, you know, like of course.
See, Santa Barbara. Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry. It was Santa Rosa. Oh, I'm sorry.
I mean, look, they even gave him a driver's license. It's a Hollywood. I mean, it's a real NASA license, not a Hollywood prop.
Why'd they put his name in like that old, like Germanic writing, though? That kind of looks sus.
Well, you didn't think that we were running the whole thing, yeah? You know, it's like
That's kind of interesting, considering that they were involved a little bit.
Well, you know, when the NASA, well, you know, we kept it under wraps back then. At least we weren't throwing up the whole Sieg on the stage back then in the NASA, you know. Moving on from that, I do have to say that it is absolutely wonderful that you were able to share so much history with us today. So much so that I think we can cover one more thing, perhaps. One more thing, perchance. Gunfox 61, because you always do throw in a lot. Let's see here. Two scheduled routes. The Concorde. Louis the 16th being executed. I just like everyone talks about that guy. You know, getting his head cut off, and he wasn't even the first. It was King Charles I in Britain who was the first. But beyond that, let's see. Suspected Soviet spy guillotine. Now, that's a fun one. But beyond that, the Concorde is also incredibly neat. It was the only supersonic passenger airliner to ever exist in the world outside the Tu-144, which we just don't talk about because that's a commie abomination. But this thing is absolutely incredible. Run by Air France and British Airways. They were just incredibly, actually had a better safety record than most other aircraft. But when one crashed in 2002, they retired the whole fleet because the fact of the matter is that these things were incredibly expensive to run and they never made money on them. They were losing them. They were losing their company's money every single time they flew. Still, it's incredibly cool that these things ever flew at all. And I just think it's really neat that in some sort of an alternate world, there could have been supersonic transatlantic flights, cutting down the flight time, I think, to like 5 hours or something like that. It was a significant cut down in time. Some people are like, wait a minute, only a cut down to like 3 hours? What the hell? Well, that's actually because they couldn't fly it supersonic over Europe or the United States. So you had to fly it only supersonic over the Atlantic, which is actually a pretty short little hop and a skip, especially when we're talking about from New York. Let's see here. We'll say from JFK to Heathrow. So we'll go with that instead of France, because who in the world measures anything to the French airports? Yeah, am I right? But here, during this whole entire stretch over Ireland and the UK, the thing had to fly subsonic because they didn't want people getting their eardrums blown out. And also, pretty much over the entirety of New England, as well as northern Canada, they couldn't fly it supersonic because they didn't want people getting their eardrums blown out. So the only place they could fly it supersonic was over the stretch from well, actually, I believe, yeah, that is Newfoundland, over to Ireland. This was the only area that they actually could fly it supersonic in. So pretty interesting about that. And that's also why.
Also, when they went subsonic or supersonic, excuse me, over this ocean right here, I think at some point the dolphins complained, and that's why they like couldn't do it anymore too.
Man, the dolphins were down there and they were going, nice day. You know, I was thinking about bullying some other animals and treating them poorly. And then they heard, and then the dolphins went, and then the government was like, this is interfering with our giant microphone relay on the bottom of the floor. We just keep hearing dolphins screaming. We need to stop that. It's like, but we're just kidding about that. But beyond that, I do have to thank you so much for the support, Gunfox 61. I'm still going to call you Gunfox 61. You see, once I know a name, I gotta keep calling him that. Like Butchie the Crouton, I always know Butchie the Crouton as Butchie 777. I cannot stop myself from saying that from reflex. Once I hear a name and get it put to memory, I'm just not changing it. Like it's impossible mentally. Like I don't have the faculties for that. I can remember any piece of history and talk about it, like that I ever read, but once I get to names, if I know a name, it's just not changing. Just cannot. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. But still, thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel they keep on running. And I cannot believe it, Matthew, but someone actually made an account called the French. Like I can
noticed it. Yeah,
I just saw it, and like because I was trying to see what super chat was going to be next, and I saw that I was like, no way, someone actually did that. But still, with that, thank you once again for support, Gunflex Season 1. Hope I addressed that incredibly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat here is going to go to, guess who? It's Chargy yet again, who puts in a 50 this time. And thank you very much, Chargy, for the second very generous support of the night. And they said, thanks so much for just being straight up guys. And thank you for the kind words, by the way.
Hey.
They said, just coming from me, the USA appreciates you guys. And double doubles are waiting for you right out here. Add pickles is optional. I'm not joking, Chargy. I want the double double so bad again. Like, I know some people are saying Whataburger is better than In-N-Out Burger. Me personally, I liked In-N-Out better. The burgers were better, honestly. And I don't know if the Enforcer, have you had it? I can't remember.
Sadly, I didn't get to, because if you remember, Matthew, on the last trip, I was like, oh, I want an In-N-Out burger. I want to try it. And then everyone told me that we couldn't because, you know, they just didn't want to. So I never got to have one.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, it's good. I like it a lot. Some people say it's overrated. Me personally, I thought it was actually rated pretty fairly, actually, at the top. And I didn't get to try those animal-style fries, though. I wanted to try that, too. But I got a double-double last time, and it was really good. So thank you very much, Chargy, for putting that toward the In-N-Out Burger Fund, and we appreciate that very much. But Enforcer, what say you?
I gotta thank you so much for the support, Sharky, and thank you so much for enjoying us being straight up guys. I'm just not into any of that funny business around here. I guess you're throwing that in maybe because I had that whole thing about I'm calling the Gulf of Mexico what it is. Like I'm not changing it over, and also the whole Fort Benning thing. I'm just not changing that either. I think that's maybe what you're throwing it in for. I thank you for appreciating that. And it's so funny to me how people base their entire lives at this point revolving around just being in line with whatever's going on in the political world at this point and not thinking beyond it. Like, why would we rename the Gulf of Mexico to something else? It's been called that for longer than our nation has even existed. It's like, why change it? Or why change Fort Benning? It's been called that literally since Fort Benning existed. Why rename it now? Like, like that, those kinds of things. I'm glad to know that people do appreciate that. I hope that's what you're sitting in that super chat for, because I'm not a political party kind of a person in that kind of a respect. If something's dumb, I'm just going to call it for what it is. And that's like one of the few things where I actually will break my silence and be like, okay, that's dumb. And if y'all were around for back in the day when another president tried to change actually did change the names of all the military bases, I would have said the same thing. I would have said that's dumb, and I still think it's dumb, and that's why I just keep calling those bases what they are. Like Fort Bragg is Fort Bragg. Fort Bragg is where you can go to also see some of the shadiest shit happen in the Army, which is kind of like the weirdest thing about Fort Bragg is that it's like their version of Paris Island in the Army, like with all the hazing and like questionable shady stuff that goes on there. But I'm still going to call it Fort Bragg. I don't even know what they renamed it to. And Fort Benning's Fort Benning, and the Gulf of Mexico is the Gulf of Mexico. It's just always going to be what it is to me, because I grew up calling it that, and it just is what it is. But anyways, with that, also someone saying renaming is for dictators. Nah, it's just like, no, I'll tell you what it is. Nowadays people always act like I have to leave a legacy, like beyond like their actual just policies, which honestly is just the whole point of the legacy is good policies. But beyond that, nowadays people believe that you have to do something goofy to leave a legacy, which I just don't believe in. And so back in the day, there was this president that was president from, and I'll make it a little bit more clear because I guess some people have short-term memory loss and can't remember this. There was a president that was president from 2008 to 2016 that went, oh, I'm going to rename all the military bases in the South because some of them are named after people who may be kind of dubious or, fought for some other group in a rebellion or something like that. So he renamed them all. And back when that happened, even as young as I was like, that's just kind of dumb. I don't know what that's about. And I was like, I'm just going to keep calling them what they are because I grew up hearing people calling them that. And I'm not going to, mentally beat myself in the head to try and forget the old names and change it to something new. I was like, that's just dumb. And so nowadays, same thing's happening with the Gulf of Mexico, and I'm like, that's just dumb. Like, I like the whole thing is so that way when you look through a history book, they're like, it used to be called the Gulf of something, or it used to be called Fort something, but it was renamed by so-and-so to this. And it's like, that's not like anything I would care about in legacy. It's just dumb. And also, you got to think about all the wasted ink and all the books out there in schools and stuff that it would have to be wasted to reprint all of these books with a new map that calls the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. And you have to think, like that's just going to create confusion.
Well, at least Alabama wouldn't have to worry about that anyway, because we didn't learn the name anyway.
Yeah, true. Like, they would have said, the Gulf, like, they literally just called it the Gulf. Like, they didn't even tell you what the Gulf was. It was just the Gulf.
They did. They just said, oh, it's down there in the Gulf. It's like there's only one Gulf in the whole world. It's like, and we grew up thinking, oh, that's the Gulf. It's like, no, that's the Gulf of Mexico. It's not just the Gulf.
Yeah, it's we're down there in the damn Gulf.
When that oil tanker blew up down there in the Gulf, it's like the Gulf. It's like, what are you talking about? Kuwait? Are we talking about America? What?
Yeah, like, I don't know. Like, honestly, that's a good point. It's like, what are we talking about? The damn Persian Gulf? It's like you're taking a vacation in the Persian Gulf. Watch out for rifle fire. But beyond that, Yeah, like if it's the Gulf of Mexico, it's the Gulf of Mexico. If Mount McKinley's Mount McKinley, that's what it is. Like I hate. Fortunate for the folks who called it Denali, but I grew up hearing Denali. Like I heard up hearing Mount McKinley, so it's McKinley to me. Like it always was. Like people were like, "Oh, it's Denali," and I'm like, "Nope, it's McKinley." I grew up with it being called that. It's just what it is. And so that's my take on that. I hope that's what you're like. Man, I appreciate you just for being like just a straightforward person. I thank you for that, and I thank you for supporting the channel and helping it to keep on running, because I hope that makes sense to folks. And also, someone's like, for the last time, it's a joke that lasts a lifetime. Okay, I'm gonna have to be completely frank here. I am tired of people treating world affairs like it's something for silly shenanigans or anything like that. It's not for silly shenanigans. Okay, this isn't Miss Doubtfire. This isn't any of your comedy movies. We're not living in a comedy. This is real life. It's serious. Like I know I make jokes all the time about the war and everything, but beyond that, there's a basic respect that things are actually serious. Like there's serious consequences of things. Can't treat everything as a joke. Like renaming something that is a major geographical landmark of our continent, something new, quote unquote, cause it's funny. I just don't like that kind of shit. I think that's stupid. Like I cannot stand how people act like world affairs now are some kind of a silly thing where you can pull hijinks and shenanigans in, because it's not. Like on that kind of a level, it isn't. I can make jokes about the world, but when it comes down to it, I'm not going to be sitting there going, let's blow up the Mexican parliament for jokes. Like, no, that's not a joke. This is a serious thing. This is world affairs. This is what things have been called for hundreds of years. It's not a joke. It's a serious ordeal. That would be my personal take. And it's like it's fun to have humor, it's fun to have jokes, but when you start trying to move jokes over into being something serious, that's when I'm like, okay, now I'm not on board with that. Like renaming the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America just because quote unquote it's funny, not for that. Like if you wanted to rename anything, honestly, I'd say that's kind of dumb. Like if you wanted to rename Cuba to the Finger of America, I go, that's a little stupid. Like, don't you think? It's Cuba. It's always been called Cuba. It'll always be Cuba.
By the way, did you know, is I've seen people saying, why don't we call it the Gulf of Texas? Or why don't the states fight it out to figure out who's going to name it what? Well, the federal government just gets to override them all and get to name it whatever they want. But,
yeah.
But anyways, California has its own Gulf over there. Like it's got its very own Gulf. It actually does have a state named Gulf.
Yeah, it's the Gulf of California.
Yeah, it's got that little. Also, what does that Baja California Sur look like? Because I've actually never looked at that. Do we have a street view on that?
Down here?
Yeah.
Oh, it doesn't look good.
Oh, it doesn't?
It looks like this. It's like the desert down here.
Is it American controlled or is it Mexican?
No, it's Mexican because back in the day, this whole entire little peninsula here was a part of the California province of New Spain, and then later Mexico.
Interesting. Yeah, I've actually never really focused on that little like outcropping right there. I didn't know really who controlled. I really don't know much about it at all, actually. But I did know the Gulf of California was there, but I didn't know much about the Baja. But very interesting.
Yeah. Also, one more thing I wanted to point out. Like, this is something interesting. Every single state through this area is actually their original names when they were a part of Mexico. Texas was called Tejas in Mexico, like when it was a part of Mexico. California was called California when it was a part of Mexico. Colorado literally means Red River in Spanish. Like, well, at least it's kind of like a bastardization of it, and that's what it was called when it was a part of Mexico. Literally all of these retained their original names from when they were a part of Mexico. So what are we going to do next? We're going to be like, Texas can't be called Texas because it was originally named under Mexico, and America's just so great, we need to rename Texas to the land of liberty or something like that, or Liberty as the state of liberty. Like, it's like, where in the world does it go to next? And then we're just going to keep justifying it for silly hijinks. It's like, no, like that would get dumb at that point. But that's why this is called Baja California and Baja California Sur, which means south. So all of this is Baja.
I got something. You know that Baja Blast, right?
Yeah.
It's a Taco Bell drink.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's a Taco Bell drink, and also it's also when a murder happens in Baja California, they call it a Baja Blast.
Oh my god!
Oh my god!
That was a good one. That was a good one, man. Oh my lord! Oh man, dude, Someone said low-key looks like Italy. Hell no. Like, this is
No,
a
hell no,
desert.
it's not Italy. Come on, man.
Man, and also they have a name in the middle, like the city of insurgents. It's literally called that. Like Cuidad Insurgentes. They were like, what do we call this town that's run by rebels? We'll call it the town of rebels. It's like, who came up with that? Like, I don't know. But still, a little wild when you think about it, man. Also, there's 9,000 Santo Domingos.
Damn. I've seen a lot of people say this is like some type of like resort place or something like that. A lot of
Really?
resorts. Yeah, I would imagine that just looking at it, that the crime might be very high on this peninsula. I just have a feeling that the Baja Blast might be a little bit more common than you'd think. But I don't know. I don't have the stats on it, so I couldn't tell you for certain. But it looks like it'd probably have high crime of some sort.
I'm not seeing a lot of resorts around here. I believe they're talking about Sinaloa, which is known for not vacations, but they actually do have some pretty nice beaches in Sinaloa. Let me see if I can find y'all some. Let's see here. Yeah, this is kind of it. Well, not quite, but yeah, this ain't it, Chief. Like this ain't it. But there are some nice beaches in Mexico, but they are not on the Baja Peninsula for the large part, because most of it is just arid desert, and there hasn't really been a lot of developments. Like, look at San Antonio. There's literally just, I don't even know what this is. It's an intellectual property registration, and it's on nothing. So even the concept of the building is intellectual because it doesn't exist like as an actual thing. But there's nothing in Baja at all. The only thing that's in Baja is Ensenada and Tijuana, which is all the way up in the north and is like literally right on the border. But you know something that's interesting about Tijuana? This is really where the Baja Blast happens. Like it happens daily. Like in
no
Tijuana.
joke.
Yeah, like it's
Tijuana's dangerous as hell to go across that border right there. It's just very rough. You know, actually, all the Mexican like border cities are actually extremely dangerous. Every single one of them, because the cartel hangs out in all of them because they are in the business of getting people across the border. But yeah, they're very very dangerous places.
But you know something, Matthew, that's even more interesting. You know the people who the folks who are doing all the Baja blasting. You know what they call them in Tijuana?
Shooters.
No, they call them the playas de Tijuana. Like
Man, that's not what I heard them being called. I heard them called something else.
Man, well, I'm telling you, man, I heard that they were called players. them boys. Like, I'm telling
Hey,
you.
wait a minute. There's a Walmart Pacifico. Zoom back in just one notch. Look down there on the bottom right. There's a Walmart Pacifico down there. Let's see what that's like.
Oh shoot! It's literally. Oh my goodness!
Oh my god!
It's the hot dog man! Oh my god!
Oh man!
Let's
It's like
see.
the Batman just showed up. The super hot dog man.
Man, they're like, man, you got hot dog man. Well, we got super hot dog. Aw, man.
Oh man!
But it's literally just a Walmart.
Yeah, it really is just a Walmart. So they got like more brutalist looking like containers for the food. Actually, that looks cleaner and more well kept than our Walmart. Actually, like about 30-fold.
The prices are insane.
39 pesos.
Yeah, that's like nothing, honestly. Pesos really aren't worth much, so it's really nothing. But let's see here.
This is actually super clean. Like, I'm not gonna lie, this is cleaner than an Alabama Walmart. Like, this is like a Whole Foods in here or something.
Holy moly!
That man, you would never catch a Walmart in Alabama looking like that. Like the Walmarts in Alabama look like a war zone.
Dude, honestly, oh my lord.
That's clean.
Yeah, dude, I feel like we're gypped. Like, honestly, like this is, we're gonna have to go shopping in Tijuana. Like, I don't even care.
They've got food in those bubbles right there in the deli thing. Look at this. They got the Lambrusco.
Man, they got that something Rosa up in here, man. Like, look at that. Holy,
that's crazy.
Like, everything is like perfectly stocked too. Like, do you notice that? It's like
like there's that Paul Masson guy right there shopping for ketchup.
Oh, the French champagne. This has always been known for its excellence. Something like that. Like, oh, wait a minute. What is this? Electric fireplaces. I've never even seen that in a Walmart here. Like, dude, honestly, they got it better in a Mexican Walmart than the American Walmarts have it.
Yeah, it's tripping me out though seeing these prices on the boards though, like 1,799 pesos and like 2,000 pesos. It makes it look like they're charging outrageous prices for it.
Well, let's go to the pesos to dollars translation. So 1,799 pesos is $87. So it's actually pretty cheap, whatever that is.
Yeah, whatever
It's
that
a
is. It looks
speaker.
like a speaker. Also, why is that guy shoving his face into the box?
Man, he's trying to. Oh wait, it's a display speaker. He's looking at it.
Damn, he's trying to get a close-up listen to that speaker. He's trying to make sure the little tweeters are working right.
But dude, they stock these things up to hell. Look at all these peppers out here.
And also, I guess it would make sense because most of the produce in American Walmart is actually mainly coming from Mexico these days, it seems like. So they're getting it literally straight from the source right in Mexico.
Man, honestly, like I'm honestly really impressed by this Walmart. Like that's actually like wildly impressive. But let's see. Oh, there's another one.
Oh, let's see what that looks like. Oh, they have a Costco too. Oh, this one looks like a little bit more
It is Hot
homegrown.
Dog Man.
Oh, what the hell is that?
I don't know. I honestly do not know. But
That's
look,
scary as hell, whatever the hell that
it's
is.
the Dia de los Muertos stuff, the Day of the Dead stuff.
A little creepy.
A little creepy, yeah, but still, Hot Dog Man is creepier. But let's see here, man.
This is creepy, man. I'm not I'm not liking this store.
Why in the world did they keep on taking pictures of the Day of the Dead stuff? They got look, they got little dresses and stuff. Like, not bad, not bad. Like, you
Man, they
know,
had an inflatable blunt up there.
what? Where?
Right up there in the last look.
Raw! It's Hot Dog
Man.
Man for real!
Man.
Aw, man. I'm here, sitting here, smoking my blunt. Aw, man.
Raw. Man, I don't even understand this stuff. They got an inflatable blunt next to an abomination or whatever this is right here. I don't even understand.
I don't get it either. But let's see. They have a Costco. They have a Costco here. They got the big bears. That's a default of every Costco. Dude, it's crazy. Like, literally, Tijuana literally has, like, all of the American stores.
Yeah, it's crazy. And also, their Costco looks a little bit cleaner, a little bit, not too much. Honestly, Costco looks kind of basic compared to the Walmart.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, man. Like, it's kind of a hard sell for the Costco's down here. But they got, like, the same liquor selections and everything. Like, the alcohol selections. I mean, it's not liquor, but, I mean, wild. Absolutely wild. Oh, my goodness. There's been a Baja Blast in here, folks. Baja blasting. Get the cops, roll up the crime scene tape. Someone got Baja blasted. Holy moly.
How do you even do that? So you'd have to like rip open like 3 or 4 bags of like thighs to do that.
I have no clue. Like, like I don't know what happened there. It looks like a crime scene, honestly. Let's see. I don't know what this girl's doing. She's like too relaxed. Might be on some of that.
Out next to the deli.
Yar, she be on that Peruvian blow. But still interesting. Very interesting stuff. But we better keep going because I think we're getting really distracted here on all this. But still wildly interesting stuff to see in Tijuana. No joke, actually. Like, very interesting. Very enlightening, actually. But anyways, it's time for us to move on and get on into the remainder of the questions. But still, with that, we are on to the next one. And also, thank you so much once again, Shargy, for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible and hopefully get an In-N-Out burger eventually. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Marion Deemert, also a longtime channel legend who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Marion, as well, for that very generous support. And they said pizza fund or coffee.
And I got to thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And thank you so much for supporting the Pizza Fund or coffee. We actually had pizza yesterday, so we would probably put that towards more coffee. Stoke, specifically. But still, thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here is going to go to none other than Ambi Pambi, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Ambi, for that support yet again, and also throwing in support on the video today as well. Thank you very much for that. And Ambi said, I think they meant to say G, asked Putin, Vlad, oh my God, I'm so glad I stopped. Ambi Pambi told me earlier, just read this one, just read it, it'll be okay.
Go on,
I was like, okay, it looks innocent enough. It looks innocent enough. And then I read the first word and I said, oh my great heavens, I can't even touch this with a 10-foot pole. But thank you very much, Ambi Pambi, for that support. I can't touch that one. I can't even read it. But Enforcer, what say you?
I just read it. that was scary. I gotta thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. But sadly, I don't think we could read that one. But still, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that somewhat well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, Andy Bones said, dude, you're 23? You better not be my son. Actually, I'm 24. The Enforcer is 23.
Soon to be
right?
23. I'm 22 right now.
That's right. You're not even 23 yet.
It's
you're
like
real young. But
it's like 2 weeks from now, Matthew. I mean, come on. Like,
Yeah.
you know, like I might as well be like 23 at this point. It doesn't even matter.
Yeah, but I'm actually 24 though, so I'm a little bit older and stuff like that. But
And also
we're all getting around eventually.
And also, someone said, "Oh, the Enforcer's 23 and hates change already." like I don't really care about change in most regards, to be entirely honest, except for changing names of things. Like that's the one thing where I'm just completely resolute on. It cannot change. Like I'm like, once something's called something, it's called that forever. Like no changing. Like it's kind of like how in North Korea, I bet some of y'all may not know this. This is actually interesting. Whenever a new child is born in the Kim family and they get a name, like Kim Jong-un, for example, when he was a kid, anyone in North Korea that was named Kim Jong-un had to, within 1 week of that time of that child being named, go and legally change their name to something else, because no one in North Korea is allowed to have the same name as one of the Kims or any of their direct family, their inner family. So they legally have to get the name changed. And that's kind of stupid to me. Like if you're born Kim Jong-un in North Korea and you're not the dictator Kim Jong-un and a Kim Jong-un is born, I just think that's stupid to rename that person, because everyone's always going to still know them as Kim Jong-un. So what is the point of having them rename themselves? It just seems stupid. Like not to say, not trying to create any similarities between dictator, just picking on the best examples I had to my mind, but like that's the same thing with renaming military bases or renaming major geographical features. Like I'm completely against changing that. Like it's just like it does not make any sense. There's no point to it. Everyone's still going to know it for what it was. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, Hokey Redneck said, do y'all have Buc-ee's in Alabama? We have actually 2 now. We have one near Huntsville and also one near Leeds, which is one that's actually close to where we are, so we actually get to go to it. Actually, we've just been to it twice, actually. Yeah. It's, for some reason, I don't have the desire to go to Buc-ee's. I don't know why that is. I think it's mainly it's so crowded all the time. It seems like a Disney World of gas stations, which is kind of weird. But I like Buc-ee's, so I'm not hating on it. It's just I don't really have the urge to go there a lot for some reason. But anyways, jumping into our next super chat here. This one goes to none other than Danny B. And huge shout out to you, Danny, for supporting the channel yet again tonight, and we appreciate that very much. And Danny says, "Good evening, Enforcers. Chef Danny here, and much better week so far. I'm glad to hear it." He said, "I got my first big catering gig this weekend for my catering business. And I hope you all had a great day off. And also, good luck, Daniel, on the big catering event, by the way. I'm glad you got that big one finally. And also, good luck with it. But Enforcer, what say you?"
I got to thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, Danny B. And I got to say, it's good to hear that you're having a good week. And you were able to get a big catering gig. Hopefully, it'll be a great one. And I got to say, we had a great day off yesterday. We actually enjoyed it a good deal. Matthew was actually not having a day off. He was working pretty much all day on his new video that he's trying to get out. But it was still good. I actually went down and hung out with one of my best friends in my hometown for a little bit, chit-chatted with him. It was pretty fun. And then took the, it felt long, Matthew, because I haven't really driven a long distance in a while, the 1.5 hour drive back. So I was like, dang, man, I was like, this is a long drive, because I haven't driven much anywhere in a good while, actually. But still,
I love driving, man. I'll just occasionally, like when I need to have a break, I'll just like drive to somewhere like maybe Huntsville or something like that just to get some driving in. Because also I'm a car person, so I like driving. But I like to take the long ones, just to get your head cleared out.
Man, I'm telling you, man, like, driving's nice. I like listening to music while I'm driving, but driving that far, I was like, dang, man, I was like, I'm not used to driving these kinds of distances anymore. I used to do it a lot back when I lived in our hometown, but since we moved up here, we've been so busy, and honestly, the roads are so jam-packed with traffic most of the time. I just don't like getting out anymore and driving that much. But anyways, with that, I thank you once again for support, Danny B. I hope that does address that incredibly well, and I hope your week only gets better from here. And so with that, thank you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to it's B-Dub 1976 who puts in a $20 donation, and thank you very much B-Dub for that
Hey!
$20 support. And B-Dub said, "I've watched my Beham neighbors, neighbors,
Oh.
enough to need to pony up finally, and I'm curious what you think about Ukraine's manpower shortage and what, if anything, you think they could and can do to stop the advances in the Donbass, which has slowed."
And I gotta thank you so much for the support, Beat Up 1976. Very interesting here. You're from Birmingham. Very cool, actually. And also, let's see. Also, they've largely stopped most advances in the Donbass, from what we know. Not many of them succeed or make it that far, and if they do, the Russians are taking significant losses to push forward even a small amount. So with that in mind, they largely have that situation under control at the moment. The only way that they could really stop that is by a superior amount of firepower in artillery or drones, which they're still working on at the moment. So they largely just have to keep working in the same direction they are right now and just increasing production, and they would be able to stop the Russians a lot easier. But still, with that, I hope that does address that well, and I thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it was not for folks like you, we would not make this thing possible. And so a big thanks to you so much once again, and we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, by the way, I'm seeing some people talking about the driving and things like that. Honestly, another big reason why I just like have to drive the car occasionally is for some reason, whenever it gets cold outside, my car tends to go dead, like really quickly, like within a couple of days. And unless I get out and drive the thing, like every couple of days, the battery will go completely dead and I can't start the car. So that's part of the reason why. And also, the maintenance bills in the car are crazy. So I don't want to let it sit there and just like start rotting or something like that, because otherwise it's going to be horrendous. And I don't want that. But anyways, jumping into our next super chat here. This one goes to Rad Doctor, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Rad Doctor, for the support and helping to keep the channel running as well. Let's see here. They said they renamed the Gulf of Mexico because let's see here. They're bringing up politics a little bit. Sadly, I can't read this one. But they're saying basically they renamed it the Gulf of Mexico because it's a political jab.
That is not the case, because the name of the Gulf has nothing to do. I'll try and address this as non-politically as possible. The name of the Gulf has absolutely nothing to do as to whether the U.S. can drill for oil in it or not. That's never impeded us in the past. I don't know why in the world that would be the idea now. Renaming it to the Gulf of America doesn't change that. The law changes that. Because, you know, you don't hear the United States going, well, I mean, you know, like, the Pacific's called the Pacific, and whatever country has a name closest to being the Pacific has the control of everything in it. That's just not how it works. We have territorial waters, and then we have an exclusive economic zone within the Gulf of Mexico, and changing the laws on drilling rights is how we drill for more oil or not. That's largely how that works. Renaming it to the Gulf of America doesn't mean we can now drill in it. We can now drill in it because the laws changed to where drilling rights are issued for people who want to create more oil rigs within the Gulf. So that's actually how it works. There really is no way that it works in the other format where you rename it, because if that was the case, why didn't we already do that way in the past so that we would just control it completely? Like that's just not how it works. But still, thank you once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here is going to go to Jay, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Jay, for that $20 support. And put in a super sticker, by the way, of the YouTube lemon creature. It loves this plant and the ground here. It's really getting very exuberant about this plant. But thank you very much, Jay, for the third ever super chat on the live stream. Excuse me, I can't talk tonight for some reason. But thank you very much for that support. And Enforcer, what say you?
I gotta thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, Jay. If it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well, and we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to French Champagne, who puts in a $20 donation. Thank you very much, Mr. French Champagne, for the $20 support and literally creating a whole username around the joke that the Enforcer was doing. But they said, long-time drinker, first-time chatter. Love you guys and what you're doing, and please take a succulent live chat. And like Zoink Scoob, are the bars open yet?
Yes. Oh, wait, hang on. I gotta do it right. Oh, the French champagne. It has always been known for its excellence. Beyond that, I gotta thank you so much for support.
French champagne, Parmesan, drink the liquor and get a headache.
Man, someone actually put that thing to a harmonizer. I think I've played it for you before, haven't I? Like, the French champagne harmonized. Oh, well, yeah, here we go. Haven't I played this for you before, Matthew?
No.
Let me see if I can find it. Oh, dang it. Dagnabbit, I can't find it. Oh, well. But I still thank you so much for the support. And the bar should be opening soon. Very soon, as a matter of fact. They always open around this time here in the South, and they always close about 3 in the morning. But still, thank you once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that this addressed out well, and thank you so much for putting in that funny name. I actually really appreciate that. But still, thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have yet another $20 super chat from Danny B. The Chef Danny, that is. He said, Chef Danny again, and here's for some Baja Blast. And take one from the chat.
Oh, no. We're going to get Baja blasted, Matthew. Oh, no.
I'm just joking, by the way. Thank you, Danny, for the support.
Yes, and we do thank you so much for the support, Danny B. And we will make sure to take one from the chat in your honor. And so what do we got, Matthew? What do we got?
All right, so the question in honor of Danny's $20 super chat is going to go to Brad Rahom, who says, does the suspension of foreign aid mean that the U.S. will no longer be helping Israel?
Well, at least for 90 days, but I have a feeling that we'll be, of course, reamping support for them after those 90 days. Or they may be given an exception here soon by the Secretary of State. Either way, they will be getting their support. I'm guaranteeing you and promising you that, because one thing that's been made very clear before the new president took office is that they have a bone to pick with the Islamic Republic of Iran. So with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. Thank you once again for sponsoring that live chat, Danny B. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Live Laugh Toaster Bath, longtime channel legend as well, who puts in a $15 donation. And thank you very much for the support. They said, for the Running Stick Fund, and haha, I love your work, gents, and please take one from the chat and LSA.
And thank you so much for the support. I really sounded country there. They gonna pass you on that damn running stick instead of the baton. But still, thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And thank you, Live Laugh Toaster Bath, for always being with this channel and supporting it, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to be here right now. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that this addressed that incredibly well. And we are on to the next one.
And that live chat question here is going to go to Andy Bones. And Andy says, you can have any fighter jet you want just for sport flying. And which one do you pick? Honestly, for me, I would have to say, between all the options available out there, that I would have to honestly pick, I would honestly, if I had to pick any fighter jet out there, I would honestly have to pick, probably the F-16, honestly. I was trying to think really hard about that. Either an F-16 or an F-35. But the F-16 seems more pure for some reason. Like, it seems more simplistic, and it seems like it'd probably be more fun to fly than the highly advanced F-35. But, Enforcer, what say you?
I would personally get the Rafale. Let me see here. From France. It just looks neat.
Yeah, I mean, it looks neat, but it looks like a real hunk.
A real hunk.
Yeah, like not so maneuverable as the F-16.
Man, this thing actually beats the F-16 in every rate fight ever.
Is that a lie?
No, that's truth. This thing is more maneuverable than the F-16.
I wouldn't have guessed it based on the look of it.
Yeah, this because of the forward canards and also its shape, and also due to how modern it is, avionics, well, not really avionics, but aircraft design had rapidly advanced, and France was actually able to produce an aircraft that would be able to beat the F-16 in a dogfight. This thing is a fair bit maneuverable. So, this thing, it actually is slightly better than the F-16 in most regards. But still, the French don't have a lot of these things. We have like 1,000 F-16s. They have, I think, about 140 of these, so we beat them in the numbers, but beyond that, this thing is pretty cool. Honestly, though, if I had to pick an American aircraft, I'd pick the F-22, because if it was only for sport purposes, this thing has thrust vectoring and would beat the Rafale in maneuverability and also just fun factor, in my opinion. The F-35 doesn't have the thrust vectoring that the F-22 has, if I'm not mistaken, so this thing would quite honestly be more fun to fly than really all of them. But still, just for the fact that stealth aircraft in the F-22 seems to be the most mainstream pick that anyone would make, I had to go with a Rafale. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. Thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, and I hope that does answer that question very well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Carl with a ton of exclamation points behind the name. And they put in a $10 donation. And thank you very much, Carl, for the support. He said, sending good vibes.
And thank you for sending the good vibes. And thank you for the support as well. You're helping this channel to keep running day in and day out. And if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to be here right now. So make sure to pick Paul Masson. But still, thank you once again for the support. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And hey, with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Point of Guinness, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Point of Guinness, for that support. They said, waste of time and money for the USA to go after the Panama Canal, as another country is in the process of building a canal too, which will reduce the value and income of the canal.
And that country is Mexico, right? Like, if I remember correctly.
No, it's not. I'm having a hard time pulling up the super chat right now, but it's not.
Let's see. Oh, let me go see if someone's building a canal in this area. I've heard about some people trying to circumvent the Panama Canal, but I haven't heard of anyone digging a canal. So let me go see. Anyone building a canal? Building a a canal in let's see, to replace Panama Canal. Yeah, there we go. Let's see what we get here. Oh, Nicaragua. Well, I guess they'd probably be building it around here. Do we see any construction works going on around here yet? No. Well, let's see. So let's see. Mexico has a plan to build one. They also have a plan to build one in Nicaragua, and I am just. It looks like this plan has existed forever, and it looks like they're trying to do it again. Let's see. But it looks like the last one fell apart. Yeah, it did fall apart. So, and now it looks like they're trying it again. But it's a 276-mile long canal. That is going to probably be economically infeasible. How much would this cost? Let's see. Yeah, that's not happening. It's not happening because the canal would have to be 276 miles long, and the Panama Canal, which was already nearly impossible to build back in the day when it was built, is not that long. It was only about, well, it's this. Here's the Panama Canal. This is the actual part that we dug. And then down here, this little, like, canal cut right here, this is what we dug, and we also built these locks, and then this area here. That's all we built. Like, this whole area through Gatun Lake, we didn't do that. That was already naturally there. So these people in Nicaragua are saying, let's just forget about using natural landmarks. We're just going to build it straight through this lake and then about another 100 or something miles to the sea. That is insane. Like, that would just be impossible from a construction standpoint because they don't even have the infrastructure, I would believe, to be able to support a project like that. Usually canals like the Suez and the Panama were built by major countries at their time, like Britain or America, that had the industrial ability and the capital to be able to invest. I don't believe that Nicaragua would ever be able to get that or do that on their own. So the Panama Canal would still be a highly important canal into the future, unless if there was some sort of competitor, and that would be highly unlikely to exist. But with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. I thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat goes to French Champagne yet again. Who puts in a $10 donation. And thank you very much, Mr. French Champagne, for that second support of the night and not leaving a comment this time, so nothing to address. But Enforcer, what say you?
I got to thank you so much for the support. You didn't throw in a comment, but the support is greatly appreciated. The French Champagne. It has always been known for its excellence, and you have always been known for your excellence. I got to thank you greatly once again for supporting this channel and helping it to keep running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to say Pumas. Thank you once again. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Enforcer Dog Jaya, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Enforcer Dog Jaya, for that support. They said Baja was almost a U.S. state, and a guy named William Walker took over the peninsula with a small militia with the intention of giving it to the U.S. and Mexico, only stopped him after he invaded Sonora too.
And I thank you so much for the support. It's kind of in a similar historical category as the Fenian raids that happened into Canada after the Civil War in 1866. It was when all the people who moved from Ireland to America said, it'd be a great idea. That's not even Irish. One second, let me think of an Irish accent. You know, it would be a great idea, and that's not even Irish. Forget it. We're just going to speak in an American accent. You know, it'd be a great idea is we just invaded Canada and took it from the British and made it a land for the Irish, and they failed at it. But still, it's kind of the same thing. This one happened in the Baja Peninsula, and a very interesting piece of history, nevertheless. And I got to thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible, and we wouldn't be able to say Sonora. But hey, speaking of which, you know some interesting group that has the name Sonora in it? I'm not even going to tell you because I don't know if YouTube likes that group anymore. But still, thank you once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one. Bing, bing, bong, bong. But what do we got, Matthew?
So our next one here goes to SG Lyoditis, who puts in a 9, and thank you very much for that support. They said, I'm kind of missing the Ukrainian anthem in the intro, and what happened? And kindly from New Zealand.
Oh, what happened? Well, we changed it out to the American anthem a long time ago. It was like 100-something days ago. And we did it because we just liked it. I mean, it's stylish. It's styling on him. You know, it's a pro-American, pro-Western channel, and we really wanted to get that across. Sure, we support Ukraine, but at the end of it, it's all for the United States of America and the sphere of Western influence that the U.S. has. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. But before we move on to the next one, someone called Deadass Forex said, bro, how can you never shut up? And I just want to answer that really quickly because it's a live show, and that's kind of the whole point. You talk on a show, like... You know, like, I don't think you do well in this business because I don't think you understand the concept of it.
Oh, man, that guy's the type of guy that if he started a YouTube channel and did a live stream, it would literally just be show. It would be no talk. It'd just be show.
Dude, I don't get that when people come in here, man, and, like, say that kind of stuff. Because it's like you're coming on to a talk show, a news show for that matter, that has to deal with the news. This guy must be one of those people, man, who watches CNN and Fox and goes, oh my God, will they just shut up already? Like when it's literally them reporting the news. Like, goodness.
Honestly, if somebody ever said that, I'd be just like, that's right. That's right. Tell them to shut up, Timmy. Tell them to shut up.
Man, like that kind of a person, they just came out of like a special place where they take care of people like that. And they're like, yes, Timmy, they aren't supposed to talk on talk shows. Like that's that kid from the Twilight Zone, Matthew, that would go, you're a bad man, and I'm sending you to the cornfield or something like that. That's that kid, like, or something like that. But it's like, yeah, JC the Music Man, it's like, you're exactly right. A broadcaster avoids dead air at all costs. Exactly. Like, if you know how to do this, you never have a dead space. Dead space is quite literally dead, and it's killing the show. You cannot stop talking. So if you're on air, you've got to be talking about something. Otherwise, you're doing something terribly wrong. There's not supposed to be dead space on a show, period. Like, that's just one of the #1 rules.
If you don't like it, then change the station.
I thought he was a nice guy, but he's really just a rat piece of shit. Whoa, Mike. Whoa, if you don't like it, turn off your station. If you don't like it, turn off your station. Man, and then...
I don't answer questions from people unless you know.
You do the... What, Mike? You sit there, you do the thing. But anyways, moving on.
Talking out the tone.
Listen, I don't talk to women reporters out of turn. Like, you gotta silence yourself. Right?
Oh dear.
Like, oh man, dude, like rough stuff. Also, man, I don't know if you saw this yesterday on Twitter. They're like, no, the fight on Netflix wasn't rigged, and then him and Jake Paul were hanging out at the Union Station in Washington D.C. together and everything. Like laughing it up, having fun and everything. I was like, man, that's kind of weird because I thought that guy said he was going to kill Mike Tyson, and then they're hanging out and chumming up and drinking and stuff at Union Station. It's like, it's kind of weird.
Who said they were going to do something?
Remember, like, when Mike Tyson slapped that dude, the frat dude, and he said, Mike Tyson's going to die tomorrow, and, and then he didn't, and then it was like it's almost like a thrown fight nearly, and everyone was like, wow, this thing seems like it was rigged, and then he was like, no, it wasn't, you're full of shit.
You're talking about that Paul kid?
Yeah, whoever he was. And then yesterday, in the middle of the inauguration, he was at an inauguration party held at Union Station in the main terminal, in the main hall, and he was there with Mike Tyson, and they were like drinking and stuff, and like Mike Tyson got on his shoulders and was like riding him around like the hall at Union Station.
Whoa.
And they were like laughing and joking, not like Seattle Salute, but like in a different way. And I was like, wait a minute, I thought y'all were supposed to be like mortal enemies, like for now and forever. Like, what happened? Like, it's like honestly, man, that whole thing was
man. How can you be mortal enemies when you got the bag? Like, they both got the bag.
Man, I mean, they got together, man, and they were like, let's do this for the bag. Like, and then they did it, like, I guess. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one. Also, thank you, Stefano, for saying love from Italy. Great to hear. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Enforcer Dog Jaya yet again, who puts in a 5. And they said, the Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
And it always sends its regards in support of American and Western interests around the globe. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And like Mike Tyson always said, like Butchie said, it's always about the Benjamins. As he moved Diddy's hand away from his leg on the couch. But anyways, but we're moving on here from that one to this next one here, which goes to Terrence Custer, who puts in a $5 donation. Thank you very much, Terrence, for that support as well. They said one executive order yesterday was lifting the ban on export LNG, and this should help move the European holdouts off of risky natural gas.
And I thank you so much for the support and help with this channel keep on running. Hopefully that will be the case. But still, American liquid natural gas might be a little bit more expensive than Russian natural gas, and so they may still try and prefer Russian natural gas in the long run. But still, I thank you so much once again for support and help with this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that well, and hopefully that will end up being the case. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Point of Guinness, who puts in a 5 and says, funds for more bots begone spray and happy hunting and keep the chat clear of bugs, LSA.
And thank you so much for the support and help with this channel to keep on running, and we will. There's been so many bots tonight in the last segment. Someone said, shut up and do the news. It's like, the news is over. It's like, what are you talking about? We've had a decent amount of them tonight, actually. But I got to thank you so much for the support and help with this channel to keep on running, because it is folks like you who make this thing possible. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to, guess who? It is Duncan VR, the channel legend who put in a 10 Australian. And thank you very much, Duncan, for that support and helping to keep the channel running. Also, disclaimer, I think at this point in the stream, pretty much everybody's left as channel legends and regulars, so I don't have to explain this about the super chat. I'm just going to say it. They said, Baba, the name is Matt. Meow. Why do I sound like a cat? Baba, meow, quack, meow. Well, now I have to explain because Duncan said something about it. I am sounding like that because you wrote it in the super chat. That's why I'm sounding like that. But Enforcer, what say you?
I gotta thank you so much for the support, Duncan VR, and I gotta say thank you for throwing in the animal noises. This is quintessential Enforcer Mattisms. He just does that, like, naturally. But I'm just kidding. I'm playing. Don't beat me.
Man, you wild.
Don't beat me, man. Oh, by the way, I forgot to tell y'all, Matthew cooked up a mean, like, I know he put this on Patreon a little while ago that he cooks. He cooked up a mean Szechuan pork bowl tonight. It was great. Like, honestly, it was pretty good. And so I just wanted to share that because that is something that Matthew does, a natural Enforcer Mattism. He cooks very well, actually. But still, I hope that does address that well. Thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. I, on the other hand, do not cook well. But with that, we are on to the next one.
They call me Chef Matt on my off times, as long as I have some meal kit to cook out of. But anyways, I'm jumping into our next one here, which goes to Snowy, who puts in a €750. And thank you very much, Snowy, for that support. And they said, how about a map update? Volhadar, south of Pokrovsk, and New York have been taken already. And according to ISW, Deep State and Majakrovsk 73.
And I thank you for the support. I don't really change the map that much anymore because most of those changes are fairly small. And also our map isn't exact like theirs is. It's really more of an approximate because, you know, I don't really have the same ability. Like, I have the abilities to track the front line. I don't have the abilities to track the front line as minutely as they do. So for that reason, this map isn't really supposed to be a perfect representation because in some areas the front is just off, like by about a mile or so in some places. It's always been like that since the start of the war, but it's still a general rougher approximate of what it looks like. But it's not exact. So yes, like those areas have changed a little bit, but still at the same time, it's so minute. Should I spend 30 minutes, because it's also not easy to change the lines on the map, like I have to either completely redraw them or do this stupid thing, it's incredibly complicated to make minor changes to it. So would it make sense to take 30 minutes to make the minor changes, or just say that's a rough approximate? So it's better to say it's a rough approximate. But I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Josh H, who puts in a 5, and thank you very much, Josh, for the support as well. He said, let's see here. Let's see. Okay, I think this is apolitical, pretty much. He said, to stay apolitical, I'd say the previous admin ran the marathon. Now the button has been passed, and the new one is sprinting to the finish.
I would largely agree with that. I think that the first one did fairly well with the situation they were given, and hopefully the second one will really be running it on home to the finish line and getting this thing wrapped up and done with, but in a successful way that would be within America and the West's greater interests. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Michael Tripto, who puts in a 5. And thank you very much, Michael, for the support. He said, like a divorce.
Yeah, like a divorce. Yeah, it kind of was. I think I said that earlier, too. I think you threw that in right when I was saying it. And so with that, thank you once again for support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Michael Tripto, yet again, who puts in a 5 and says, Israel is a force to be messed with.
And I gotta say, it really is a force to be messed with, I would say. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, let's see. Thank you once again, and we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to S. Pedro, who puts in a $5 donation. Thank you very much, S. Pedro, for that support. He said, what about a military challenge coin and create a coin just like the U.S. Armed Forces with 3-letter agencies have?
Yeah, that would be pretty cool. We have thought about that in the past. It's just that it's just that we don't know if we should try and throw that in as a goodie or as its own thing, or how popular that would be to actually run a merch run on that. Because when we do merch runs, we kind of have to gauge how popular something will be to wonder if that will justify the cost of doing it or not. So we'll see. But I still think that would be a cool idea for merch in the future. And so with that, thank you once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Carl, yet again, who puts in a 5. He says, would you like a plum? And great show tonight, guys. And thank you very much, Carl, for the kind words yet again.
And hello there, and would you like a plum, Governor? And thank you so much for enjoying the show tonight, Carl. We haven't seen Alan the Marmot in a minute, but one day we will again. And so with that, thank you once again for support. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Chris, and Chris puts in a 5. And thank you, Chris. He said, Enforcer Matt, all these war videos are hard to watch and takes a toll on you. And what would you say is the worst thing you've seen? And honestly, I can't repeat what the worst thing I've seen is, actually. I'm not doing that for dramatic effect. We've actually seen some really horrendous things on video. Some of them we had to watch as part of trying to get the news, and some of them were just accidental, honestly, that I just happened to come across. And then later in the video, I realized, oh, shit. I just saw something on that video I wish I hadn't seen. But no, there's some pretty rough things being put out from the war, and some of the things making onto the internet end up getting removed, but they're there for a short time before they get removed. But I can't repeat it, sadly. But Enforcer, what say you?
Sadly, I can't really repeat it either. YouTube wouldn't be happy if I did. But we have seen a lot of horrendous stuff in the background, is the best way I can put it. And every once in a while, it is interesting, because I used to think that all that stuff, like they would say that moderators of Facebook and stuff would get like PTSD or something like that. I still think that's kind of a little over dramatized personally, because we kind of look at that stuff as a living. And honestly, a lot of it's incredibly rough and really graphic, but every once in a while I do occasionally get a nightmare on the things that I've seen. Like my brain just takes some of those things and then puts them together into some sort of a horrific nightmare that we will be venturing into in the Twilight Zone. But beyond that, there's been some pretty horrendous stuff. You just see it in the line of this work, but when you see it enough, you eventually just kind of get numb to it, and it is what it is. But there's been a lot of horrendous things that still stick with me to this day that I could remember, but I don't think YouTube would be happy about me saying on air. But with that, I hope that unfortunately addresses why we can't answer that question, but thank you once again for support. And we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Ryan H., who puts in a 5. He says, what's your opinion on the idea of the U.S. sending armed forces into Mexico to take out the cartels? Oh, Mexico would never allow that in a million years. They would probably never allow it, because the individual that's in charge of Mexico right now is already sort of like getting at odds politically with America for reasons that we can't get into right now. But they would probably never welcome that, honestly. But Enforcer, what say you?
Yeah, they would never allow it. And then if we did it anyways, that's technically an armed invasion of Mexico, because our armed forces are on foreign soil without their permission or without any form of an agreement, moving through as they want to. So that would technically be an invasion. It probably would not go well, to be entirely honest. I think it's generally a poor idea, and why not let the Mexicans deal with it? Because it's largely their own issue. Did the Soviet Union come to the United States in the 1930s and 20s and help us to deal with Al Capone? No. It's like, so why in the world are we wanting to go down to Mexico and deal with their version of the mafia? It's like, that largely is their own issue, not necessarily ours. And while it may be impacting the United States in some way, that's still their issue, not really ours. We can only control it on our end. I don't really think it's a good idea to go down there. And also on top of that, I just want to say this again, because people keep bringing things up like this, like, invading Panama or invading Britain or now sending the military into Mexico. I thought the whole thing that folks didn't like in the United States was Americans dying in quote unquote senseless conflicts. So why in the world is it like now the hip thing to just keep suggesting that we send the U.S. military to wherever to do whatever? Because people are going to get injured and killed doing this kind of stuff. And then, then people are going to be whining, oh, Americans are dying, and for what? We could have just left them alone. And then people be going, oh, it's justified, but now it's just a flip and it's a 180 from what it used to be. I don't get that kind of stuff. I'll just be honest, because people say, oh, the war in Ukraine is terrible. People are dying every day. We need to end it now. And then they'll also go, let's invade Mexico. It's like, where in the world is the logic? Like there has to be some sort of consistent logic. It's like either we are pro-interventionist, where the United States goes and does these things, but we do it across the board, or we're anti-interventionist and we're largely isolationist and we just largely leave everyone to their own affairs. So what is it? Like once again, it's not an issue with if they want to do that or not, because if they want to do that across the board, then I get it. But the problem is that in some areas we don't want to do that, or at least that's what's publicly said, and then in others we do. So where in the world is the clear line message on we're either pro-interventionist or we're not? Like, it's not about which one do we find justified. It's about generally across the board, are we for expanding America's interest around the globe and just doing whatever the hell we have to do it? Or are we just going to sit back and just watch everything unfold around us and just kind of hope for the best? Which one are we for? And that's kind of where I have a detachment from both groups in modern American politics, because they never are clear on that kind of messaging. Because the war in Afghanistan, oh, terrible, it was terrible, it was horrendous, oh my god, it was so bad. But for the same group that says that, the war in Ukraine is justified. So war is bad across the board when we're talking about a situation like Afghanistan, but then war is good when we talk about Ukraine. But then it's the flip side for the other group. The war in Afghanistan was justified, but the war in Ukraine just simply is not. And there's no real reasoning or justification as to why they're different or why one's good and one's bad. It's just that it happenstance, one's good and one's bad, and it just depends on what political party you're in, and it doesn't make any sense. But anyways, with that, I generally would say with Mexico, however, I'm just not for it. Like, it's not really within America's interest. It doesn't adhere to any kind of international treaty. It would technically be an invasion of the largest trade partner we have globally. That makes no sense. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. I thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Uncovered Cube 7, who puts in a 2. And they said LSA and Cero Miedo MRSA.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running and make Russia small again. And with that, thank you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Blizzard, who puts in a 2 and simply says coffee.
Hey, and thank you so much for the coffee, Blizzard. And helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat is going to go to Chris, who puts in a 2 and says, how many oil refineries does Russia have left?
They have about 80 to 85% of them left in an operating condition right now. I couldn't give an exact number, but that would be the percentage at the moment. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. Thank you once again for support. And we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to the Secret Vault, who puts in a 2 and says, what are the butcher bots and the chop bots?
I don't know. I would not know that. Unfortunately, I'd have to declare ignorance on that one. But I do thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our last one here is going to go to Snowy, who puts in a 2 and says, for Andrew's throat, a coffee, and 1 from the chat.
And luckily, my throat has been healed. I'm not really coughing that much anymore. Like, it's maybe like once a day at this point. And I got to thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And, of course, thank you for the coffee fund. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to have that nice sip of coffee that makes us hyper for the whole stream. And so with that, thank you once again. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and with that, we are now fresh out of Super Chats. So once again, thank you all for supporting the channel yet again tonight and helping to keep us running. It's now time to grab our live chats and the Morse code decoders of the stream. And tonight, we had Cliff Simonson, Mark Hodges, Earl Bernew, Kevin J, Paul Stoltz, David Millsaps, Roy Fluffiness, Airbell Garbo, and Joni Dog. They said the LSA Core Morse code decipher says, Russia looks like they might not be having an easy time, depending on what they do. And LLT, LSA.
And And that's the sound of money. Y'all hit it dead on the nail. And I got to say a big congratulations to y'all for helping this channel to know what the Morse code message is, because y'all have done that time and time again for over 1,000 days. And I got to congratulate y'all once again for getting that right, because if it wasn't for y'all, no one would know what that Morse code message says. And so with that, we are on to the last 3 questions of the night. Due to time constraints and us going over time, unfortunately, again, we will only be getting 3 live chats, and then we'll be rounding out tonight's stream. And so with that, we're on to the third to last question of the night.
All right, so this one is going to go to, let's see here. Taking a look here, looking through these questions. Let's see. Here's a good question from Rob McGuffin. He said, where are the oligarchs in Russia, and why are they so quiet and not forcing Putin out?
They are all over Russia and sometimes around the world. But the reason why they're quiet and not forcing Putin out is because they're not really in power because they're an economic giant. They're really in power because they're a Putin yes man. And that could easily be arranged where they're no longer in charge. So with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well. And we are on to the second to last question of the night.
All right, and moving on here to this one. Also, by the way, I saw a hot dog man make a good point. They said, I feel like the cartel is almost like a Taliban situation. If the U.S. were to try to fight the cartel, they would just hide and blend in as normal citizens until the fight was over. Somewhat with the cartel, I think they would. I'm not an expert on the cartel, by the way, so I'm not going to pretend like I know everything about that. But generally speaking, the cartel is generally very intertwined with the government in Mexico. It's just the way it's worked because the cartel produces a lot of money, a lot of money. And of course, money talks, and they find their ways to sort of influence the government to a large extent. So the government there is really not super incentivized to take them out. And also, they really don't have the necessary equipment to actually get rid of the cartel, even if they wanted to. So, you know, they fight with them occasionally, but it's really not a real strong fight, if you know what I mean. It's kind of like a sort of half-assed in it, really. But anyways, moving on from that, we're now moving into our, what was it, second to last question of the night?
Second to last question of the night.
So this one is going to go to, let's see here. This one goes to Activista, who says, I like Panama, and check out the new islands they added.
And I thank you for the for saying that you like Panama. Panama is an interesting country, and I don't know what new islands they added. Maybe the island is the Isla Escudo de Verguas. Maybe I don't know. But they have the Playa de Karen up here. That's the Playa Karen. Let's take a look at these. Holy moly, the beach is clean and pristine. Man,
Oh, I like that.
I would swim in this water, 100%. But let's see here. Maybe it's the Coiba Island. Maybe. Maybe it's the penal colony on the island.
Whoa.
Holy moly, it's legitimately a prison. Wow. It's an abandoned one at that. It's not used anymore. But that's very interesting. Maybe a nice swim would be seen there. But nevertheless, I got to thank you for asking the question. I just don't know what new islands they've added, unfortunately. But with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well. And it is time for us to move on to the final question of the night. And so, Matthew, who was the last person to throw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is going to be, it's going to be Chris, who says, here's my question. Do you think Russia will devolve into a civil war instead of surrendering?
I believe that the Russian Federation has a high chance of economic collapse before they surrender. Whether that turns into a civil war or not, I'm a little unsure. Maybe, but I have a feeling if Putin started to see that there was some sort of a power struggle happening, he'd probably just flee because the consequences of a civil war could be pretty extreme, considering that a nuclear civil war could occur, and that would be devastating just for Russia and really for no one else. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion, which once again, take that with a grain of salt. I could be right or wrong. But with that, we've reached the end of tonight's stream, and I got to thank you all so much once again for watching. It's been an absolute honor and a pleasure to be able to run this stream for each and every single one of y'all. At the peak tonight, there was 10.2 thousand people here, and 71,000 people have watched this stream before it ended. And we were entirely honored and appreciative of each and every one of y'all giving us your time to be able to hear the news here from the Enforcer channel. And so with that, thank you all so much once again for watching, and we will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine. And so with that, good night, good luck. Take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die.
And with that, folks, once again, huge thanks for another great stream tonight. Be sure to join the Enforcer midday tomorrow if there is enough news to cover for the midday short war video, and also tomorrow night at 10 p.m. Eastern for the next night of war news streams. But with that, folks, thank you all for watching once again, and of course, Slava Ukraine, Herom Slava, get some rest, and of course, good night.
To the